Hey there, tonight we're exploring the ancient whispers of Norse myths, where the gods' tales cradle you to dreams. Not the Hollywood version, you know, but a world where the whisper of a raven could change destiny. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now settle in, maybe turn on some white noise or grab your favorite blanket, and let's drift into tonight's story together. In the beginning, there wasn't light, and there wasn't darkness either. There was just Ginnungagap. That's the yawning abyss that kicks off Norse mythology, a cosmic void so vast and empty it makes the vacuum of space look like a bustling New York City street. On one side of this abyss was Niflheim, a realm of ice and mist colder than a Viking's ex-wife's glare. On the other side was Muspelheim, a fiery furnace that felt like a sauna set to lava. Now, in this cosmic game of hot and cold, Niflheim and Muspelheim eventually collided at Ginnungagap, and voila, the first Norse god was born, Ymir. Ymir wasn't your average deity. Think of him more as the original giant, the prototype of all Jotnar giants, and his hygiene left much to be desired. From his armpits, other giants sprang forth. Yes, you heard that right. And from his groin, because why not, came more of his kind. It's like a family reunion where everyone just pops out of each other. But giants weren't the only ones making an entrance. Enter Ordhamla, the primeval cow, who licked salty ice blocks and in doing so, revealed Beri, the first of the Aesir gods, from the frozen depths. Beri would let her father Bor, who would marry Bisla, and together they would have 3 divine sons, Odin, Vili, and Vi. Now, Odin wasn't just any god. He was the head honcho, the CEO of the Norse pantheon, wielding authority and a mean spear named Gungnir. These 3 brothers decided they'd had enough of Ymir's chaotic existence. In a move that could only be described as extreme urban planning, they killed Ymir and used his body to construct the world. His blood became the seas and oceans, somewhat of a salty detail, his flesh the earth, and his bones the mountains. Ymir's skull became the sky, and his brains morphed into clouds. So next time you're cloud-gazing, remember you might be staring at the cerebral remains of a slain giant. But where do the gods hang their helmets? Enter Asgard, the divine realm where the Aesir reside. To get there, you cross Bifrost, the rainbow bridge, not just any colorful display, but one solid enough to withstand stampeding guards and the occasional frost giant invasion. Asgard wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, though. It was more like a cosmic corporate headquarters where Odin, Thor, and the rest of the divine crew would plot, feast, and occasionally bicker like an immortal sitcom ensemble. Now, let's talk about Yggdrasil, the immense ash tree that holds everything together like cosmic duct tape. Picture it as the ultimate Wi-Fi router connecting the 9 realms. At the top of Yggdrasil perches an eagle. Rumor has it, he's got an attitude problem. And at its roots, a dragon named Nidhogg gnaws away, which is less of a security threat and more of an existential one. These 9 realms are not just random plot points. They are the Norse universe's very fabric. You've got places like Midgard, the middle realm where humans live their short, brutish lives, and Jotunheim, where giants plot their next mischief. There's also Elfheim, home of the light elves, who are less pixie dust and more mystical landlords, and Svartalfheim, where the dwarves, master craftsmen, hammer away in their subterranean workshops. What's fascinating about these myths is how they provided a worldview that the Norse people could navigate their lives by. When you're living in a place where winter seems to last longer than a family dinner conversation, and the sun feels like it's on permanent vacation, having a set of stories that explain why things are the way they are is comforting. The Norse myths were like ancient existential post-it notes, reminders that even in chaos, there's a semblance of order, or, at the very least, a cosmic tree keeping everything from falling apart. But let's not romanticize things too much. Vikings weren't just sitting by the fire sharing tales of Odin's escapades. They were farmers, traders, explorers, and yes, occasionally, axe-wielding raiders. The harsh Scandinavian winters meant that survival wasn't just a seasonal game, but a year-round sport. Crops had to be grown in short summers, stored for the endless winters, and livestock raised in conditions that made surviving a Herculean task. Mythology played a part in that too. If your crops failed or your livestock died, You could always blame the gods, or a mischievous Loki, rather than poor agricultural practices. Economically, the Norse weren't just raiders with a penchant for looting monasteries. They had a vibrant trade network. Vikings traded everything from walrus ivory to slaves, and they were as likely to be found in the bazaars of Baghdad as they were in the icy fjords of Norway. Their longships were engineering marvels of the time, sleek, fast, and shallow enough to navigate the rivers of Europe like aquatic ninjas. So, the next time someone waxes poetic about the noble savage of the Viking world, remind them that these were complex societies with rich mythologies that explained not just the seasons and the stars, but also why life could be so harsh and unforgiving. Myths, after all, are humanity's way of making sense of the senseless, and for the Norse, that meant a cosmos built from the body of a giant, overseen by gods who were as flawed and fascinating as the people who believed in them. And speaking of flawed and fascinating, let's waltz into the world of Norse deities, starting with Odin, the All-Father. Imagine him as the ancient equivalent of a one-eyed CEO, equal parts wise and ruthless. Far from just a sky-dwelling spectator, Odin was deeply invested in the human drama below, his penchant for wandering the mortal realm disguised as an old man. Think Gandalf with an agenda, allowed him to gather wisdom and occasionally stir the pot. Odin was the god you go to for knowledge, victory in battle, and perhaps a little poetic inspiration on the side. He didn't acquire all this wisdom through polite conversation, though. Legend has it he sacrificed an eye at Mimir's well in exchange for insight. Talk about a steep price for a drink. Now, if Odin was the brains of the operation, Thor was the brawn. Picture him as the ultimate Norse action hero, a red-bearded, hammer-wielding storm guard whose exploits could fill a saga longer than a Scandinavian winter. His hammer, Mjolnir, wasn't just any weapon. It was the cosmic fly swatter that kept giants and other nasties in line. But here's the kicker. Thor's popularity wasn't just about his muscle. He was also the protector of humanity, a kind of divine bouncer, ensuring that the forces of chaos didn't crash the party. Loki, on the other hand, was the party crasher extraordinaire. The trickster god, a shapeshifter with a silver tongue, was as unpredictable as the weather in Reykjavik. Loki's antics ranged from the humorous to the downright dangerous. Need a laugh? Loki once turned into a mare to distract a giant stallion. Get this, later giving birth to an 8-legged horse named Sleipnir. Need a villain? Loki was also responsible for engineering the death of Baldur, the god of beauty and light, setting off a chain of events that would eventually lead to Ragnarok, the Norse version of the apocalypse, complete with a dragon, giants, and a wolf that could swallow the sun. Talk about a family reunion gone wrong. These gods and their escapades weren't just bedtime stories to the Norse people. They were the ancient version of celebrity gossip, complete with divine drama and flawed personalities. Imagine living in a world where the tabloids were filled, not with Hollywood scandals, but with tales of Thor's latest giant slaying or Loki's newest trick. The myths served as both entertainment and moral lessons, reflecting human nature's complexities in a way that was relatable, even if it involved a bit more magic and mayhem than your average Tuesday afternoon. But why did these stories resonate so much with the Norse? For one, the gods were a reflection of the harsh realities of Viking life. Odin's quest for wisdom mirrored the Norse pursuit of knowledge and survival skills in an unforgiving environment. Thor's protection was akin to the defense of one's home and family against the ever-present threats of the natural world and rival tribes. And Loki's chaos. Well, that's the unpredictable element of life that no amount of planning can account for. In a world where a bad storm could decimate your crops, or a rival clan could raid your village, the gods represented the forces beyond human control, providing a framework to understand, and sometimes blame, what couldn't be explained. The everyday life of the Norse was a far cry from the divine antics of Asgard, yet the two were inextricably linked. Rituals and offerings were a common part of life, with sacrifices made to ensure good harvests, safe voyages, and victory in battle. Archaeological finds suggest that the Norse took their worship seriously, with temples and sacred sites dotting the landscape. The economy, heavily reliant on agriculture and seafaring, meant that the whims of the gods were as much a part of business planning as any longship's cargo manifest. When setting sail on a trading expedition, a Viking might leave offerings to Njord, the sea god, hoping to avoid storms that could turn a profitable journey into a catastrophe. But let's not sugarcoat it. Viking life was tough, and the gods weren't always benevolent. Just like the unpredictable Loki, the deities could be capricious, demanding, or even downright cruel. The Norse knew that the gods' favor was something to be earned, not taken for granted. This precarious relationship with the divine was mirrored in their social and political structures, where loyalty and strength were valued, but betrayal and revenge were never far from the surface. The myths, therefore, weren't just stories. They were a survival guide wrapped in allegory. They offered explanations for the unexplainable and a sense of control in a world where so much was uncertain. And in the long, dark Scandinavian winters, when the sun seemed as elusive as a pot of gold at the rainbow's end, these tales were the light that could brighten even the gloomiest of days. So, next time you hear Thor's name invoked as a comic book hero, or see Odin portrayed as a wise old man with a raven on his shoulder, remember, these gods were more than just characters in a myth. They were the celebrities of their day, embodying the hopes, fears, and dreams of a people who saw the world as a place of both wonder and danger. And just like any good celebrity story, they remind us that even the mightiest beings have their flaws. Stay tuned for more divine gossip and cosmic shenanigans as we continue to unravel the Norse myths and their enduring impact on those who believed in them. So, as the curtain lifted on this divine drama, it wasn't just the gods who were stealing the show. Enter the Norse heroes, those larger-than-life figures whose tales of daring deeds and epic journeys were the blockbuster sagas of their day. Think of them as the ancient equivalent of action movie stars, only replace CGI effects with sheer grit and a knack for making the impossible seem like a weekend hobby. These tales weren't just entertainment. They were blueprints for living a life of honor, bravery, and occasionally strategic cunning. Take, for instance, Sigurd the Dragon Slayer, a hero whose reputation was harder than a fresh-baked loaf of flatbread. Sigurd was the leading man in the Valsunga saga, the Norse epic that's got more twists and turns than a fjord. This guy took on Fafnir, a dragon with a hoarding problem that would put your average squirrel to shame. Armed with a legendary sword named Gram, crafted no less by the master smith Regin, Sigurd didn't just slay the dragon, he bathed in its blood. The result, he became nearly invincible, with skin as tough as the hide of the beast he'd vanquished, save for a small leaf-shaped spot on his back. Talk about a heroic Achilles heel. But Sigurd's story wasn't just about dragon-slaying bravado. It delved into the murky waters of betrayal, love, and vengeance, universal themes that resonated with the Norse, because they were as relevant in a Viking hall as they are now on a streaming service near you. The saga's political undertones reflected the shifting alliances and power struggles of the Viking Age, where loyalty could be as fickle as the North Sea. And speaking of the North Sea, let's not forget the seafaring exploits of heroes like Ragnar Lothbrok. Now, Ragnar's sagas are the stuff of legend, filled with tales of daring raids and cunning strategies. This wasn't just a guy with a cool name. He was a master mariner, leading fleets across the treacherous waters to pillage and plunder with the kind of audacity that would make a modern pirate blush. But beneath the romantic veneer of adventure lay the harsh reality. These voyages were no pleasure cruises. Each trip was a gamble against nature and rival clans, with survival rates that could make a Las Vegas slot machine seem generous. Ragnar's exploits were more than just stories of conquest. They were lessons in leadership and resilience. In a world where the sea was both a highway and a graveyard, being a skilled navigator and a shrewd tactician was as crucial as wielding a sword. The sagas emphasized qualities like bravery, loyalty, and honor, values that were as essential for a Viking chieftain as they were for the farmers and traders who followed him. Now, let's pivot back to those traders because, believe it or not every Viking was a helmet-wearing marauder. Many were merchants, skilled in the art of negotiation and trade, whose economic networks stretched from Constantinople to the icy reaches of Greenland. The Norse weren't just trading in furs and amber. They were savvy entrepreneurs, dealing in everything from silk and spices to slaves and silver. Their longships weren't just instruments of war. They were the cargo ships of the Viking economy, designed for speed and adaptability, able to navigate the rivers of Europe like aquatic ninjas. This economic prowess wasn't just about wealth. It was a means of survival in a harsh climate where resources were as scarce as a sunny day in a Norwegian winter. The sagas mirrored this reality, often highlighting the importance of resourcefulness and adaptability. Heroes like Egil Skallagrimsson, a warrior poet whose exploits were as colorful as his verses, embodied these traits. Egil wasn't just a fighter. He was a diplomat and a negotiator, skilled in the art of persuasion as well as combat. His story, like many others, was a testament to the value of wit and wisdom in navigating the treacherous waters of Viking politics. And let's talk politics, because the sagas were as much about power plays and palace intrigue as they were about heroic deeds. The Norse world was a tapestry of shifting alliances and blood feuds, where a well-placed marriage or a timely betrayal could change the course of history. The sagas reflected this complex social dynamic, with heroes often caught in the web of familial obligations and political ambitions. In a society where kinship ties were as binding as iron chains, loyalty was a precious commodity, but so was the willingness to break those bonds when necessary. The sagas weren't just reflections of society. They were tools for shaping it. They instilled values and norms, serving as moral compasses for the Norse people. In a world where survival depended on strength and cunning, the tales of heroes like Sigurd and Ragnar provided a roadmap for navigating the challenges of life. They taught lessons in courage and resilience, emphasizing the importance of community and the consequences of betrayal. But let's not romanticize the sagas too much. For all their epic grandeur, they also held a mirror to the darker aspects of Viking life. Violence and bloodshed were common themes, reflecting the brutal realities of a warrior culture where honor was often measured by the number of enemies slain. The sagas didn't shy away from the harshness of life. They embraced it, capturing the raw, unvarnished truth of a world where death was a constant companion. And yet, even amidst the blood and battle, there was room for beauty and inspiration. The sagas were rich tapestries of language and imagery, with verses that could capture the majesty of a storm at sea or the quiet grace of a winter's night. They were a testament to the Norse love of storytelling, a tradition that has endured through the centuries, captivating audiences with its blend of myth and reality. As we delve deeper into the world of Norse heroes and their sagas, it's clear that these stories were more than just tales of adventure. They were reflections of a society grappling with the challenges of a harsh environment, where survival depended on strength, cunning, and a little bit of luck. They were moral guides, teaching lessons in courage and resilience, and they were mirrors of the human condition, capturing the complexity of a world where the line between hero and villain was often blurred. So, as we continue our journey through the Norse myths, remember, these stories are more than just tales of gods and heroes. They are windows into a world that, despite its distance in time, still resonates with the challenges and triumphs of the human spirit. Stay tuned for more adventures and insights as we explore the enduring legacy of these epic sagas. As we dig deeper into the Norse myths, it's time to unravel the grand finale, the mythological mic drop known as Ragnarok. This wasn't just any doomsday prophecy. It was the Norse equivalent of a summer blockbuster, complete with cosmic battles, fiery destruction, and enough drama to make a soap opera look like a placid day at the park. Ragnarok was an epic showdown that captured the Norse penchant for storytelling while revealing their resigned acceptance of life's inevitable end, all wrapped up in a tale that could keep even the most jaded Viking on the edge of his seat. So, what exactly was Ragnarok? Picture an apocalyptic clash of titans, gods, and monsters, all fighting it out in a cataclysmic finale where everything, and I mean everything, was on the line. The prologue to this doomsday scenario featured ominous signs like Fimbulwinter, a 3-year-long winter so harsh would make your worst February seem like a tropical getaway. During this icy siege, the world would be plunged into chaos, with brother turning against brother, and no one left to shovel the sidewalks. But why did the Norse envision such a cataclysmic event? Let's dig into the gritty details. The Vikings lived in a world where environmental changes weren't just the stuff of speculative fiction. They were daily realities. Harsh winters, unpredictable weather, and the ever-present threat of famine were as familiar to them as a horn of mead at the end of a long day. Imagine the economic impact of a particularly nasty winter. Crops failing, livestock dying, and local markets grinding to a halt. The Norse didn't have the luxury of a meteorological forecast. They had to roll with the punches Mother Nature threw their way. And let's not forget the economic factors. The Viking world was a tapestry of trade routes and economic exchanges, a complex system as intricate as a piece of Norse jewelry. When Ragnarök was concocted in their myths, it wasn't just a tale of gods and giants. It was an allegory for the collapse of this interconnected world. Imagine the panic if the trade routes they relied on were suddenly severed. Walrus ivory, amber, and precious metals, all vanishing like smoke in the wind. The economic fallout would be as devastating as any apocalyptic vision. But Ragnarök wasn't just about doom and gloom. It also served as a psychological coping mechanism, a way for the Norse to come to grips with the inherent unpredictability of their lives. The myth was a release valve for the collective anxiety of a people who knew that life was as fleeting as a summer sunset in Scandinavia. The idea of an end where even the gods met their fate was strangely comforting. After all, if Odin and Thor couldn't escape destiny, what chance did anyone else have? And let's talk about the cosmic cast of characters involved in this grand finale. You had Loki, the ultimate trickster, finally picking a side and inciting chaos on a scale that would make his previous antics look like child's play. His wolfish offspring, Fenrir, was set to devour Odin, while the world serpent, Jormungandr, would square off against Thor in a battle that promised more thunder than a summer storm. It was a family reunion of epic proportions, complete with enough backstabbing and betrayal to satisfy even the most demanding Norse audience. As the gods clashed with their foes, the world itself would be torn asunder. Earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions were just the opening acts in this apocalyptic symphony. The sky would split open, and fire would rain down from Muspelheim, led by the flaming giant Surtur, wielding a sword so bright it made the sun look like a dim bulb. In this cosmic melee, even the sun and moon couldn't escape, swallowed whole by hungry wolves. Talk about a bad case of indigestion. Yet, as bleak as it all sounds, Ragnarök also contained a glimmer of hope. After the dust settled and the fires burned out, a new world was prophesied to rise from the ashes, renewed and fertile, ready for a fresh start. 2 human survivors, Lif and Lifthrisir, would emerge from their refuge in Yggdrasil, tasked with repopulating the earth. It was a bold reminder that even in the face of destruction, life found a way to persist. But why did the Norse incorporate such a rebirth into their doomsday myth? Perhaps it was a reflection of their deep-rooted understanding of nature's cycles, the ebb and flow of life and death that governed their existence. For people who lived at the mercy of the seasons, the idea that life could begin anew was as comforting as it was inspiring. It was a testament to their resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always the promise of a new dawn. The myth of Ragnarök was more than just an apocalyptic tale. It was a mirror reflecting the realities of Norse life. It highlighted the precarious balance between order and chaos, a balance that was constantly tested by environmental challenges and economic uncertainties. In a world where survival depended on adaptability and resourcefulness, the Norse embraced the notion that the end was not truly the end, but merely a transformation. And let's not forget the cultural impact of this myth. Ragnarök wasn't just a story told around the fire. It was a narrative that shaped the Norse worldview, influencing everything from their art to their social structures. The idea that even the mightiest gods could fall reinforced the importance of humility and the acceptance of fate. It was a lesson in impermanence, a reminder that nothing was set in stone, not even the gods themselves. As we continue to explore the Norse myths, it's clear that these stories were more than just entertainment. They were a reflection of the human condition, capturing the complexities of a world where the line between myth and reality was often blurred. The tale of Ragnarök, with its epic battles and cosmic upheaval, was a testament to the enduring power of storytelling, a reminder that even in the face of destruction, there is always the possibility of renewal. So, as we leave the battlefield of Ragnarök behind, remember, these myths were more than just tales of gods and monsters. They were windows into the souls of the people who created them. They remind us that, even in our own lives, the end is never truly the end, but merely the start of something new. Stay tuned for more insights and adventures as we continue to unravel the rich tapestry of Norse mythology and its lasting impact on the world. Norse myths, much like the gods themselves, have never truly faded into obscurity. Instead, they've been reborn, reimagined, and repackaged for a modern audience with an insatiable appetite for the epic and the fantastical. Let's face it, these ancient tales have managed to worm their way into the cultural zeitgeist, like a mischievous Loki pulling a fast one on the guards. From the pages of comic books to the silver screen, Norse mythology is the gift that keeps on giving, a timeless treasure trove of stories that resonate with the romance of heroism and the realism of human folly. Take Thor, for example. In Norse myth, he's the red-bearded deity wielding Mjolnir, a hammer that could flatten a mountain and still have time for dessert. Fast forward to the 21st century, and he's been transformed into a Hollywood heartthrob, complete with abs that could rival his hammer's might. Chris Hemsworth's portrayal of Thor in the Marvel Cinematic Universe has brought the Thunder God into living rooms worldwide, making him a household name. It's a testament to the enduring appeal of these myths that Thor, once a deity of thunder and storms, is now also a pop culture icon, striding across screens with swagger and wit. But why do these stories still hold us captive? Perhaps it's because they tap into universal themes that transcend time and place. The Norse myths are packed with tales of betrayal, courage, and the eternal struggle between good and evil. These are stories that speak to the human condition, offering us a mirror to our own lives, albeit with a splash more magic and mayhem. The gods, despite their divine status, are as flawed and fallible as the rest of us, making them relatable, even if their antics are a tad more extravagant. Yet, it's not just about the gods. The myths also offer a window into the Norse worldview, reflecting the social and economic realities of the Viking Age. The Norse were seafarers and traders, their longships cutting through the icy waters like daggers through silk. These ships weren't just vessels of war. They were the lifelines of a vibrant trade network that stretched from the fjords of Norway to the bustling bazaars of Baghdad. When you consider that a longship could travel up to 120 miles a day, it's clear that the Norse weren't just raiding parties. They were global players in a medieval economy. This economic savvy is mirrored in the myths, where gods like Odin and Njord navigate the complexities of divine politics and trade. Odin's quest for knowledge wasn't just a philosophical pursuit. It was a reflection of the Norse emphasis on wisdom as a tool for survival in an unpredictable world. Njord, the sea god, represented the lifeblood of Norse commerce, his influence stretching across the waves like a benevolent hand, guiding the ships safely to port. The myths also highlight the social structures of Norse society. In a world where kinship ties were as strong as iron, loyalty was paramount. Yet the sagas are rife with tales of betrayal and revenge, reflecting the precarious nature of alliances. The gods themselves were embroiled in familial feuds and power struggles, their divine drama echoing the political machinations of the human world below. It's a reminder that, even in a time when the gods walked among men, the challenges of trust and treachery were ever present. But let's not kid ourselves. The romanticized vision of Norse mythology often glosses over the gritty realities of Viking life. The Norse weren't just noble warriors and wise gods. They were also farmers and traders, their survival dependent on the whims of nature and the strength of their communities. The myths, with their tales of heroic deeds and epic battles, offered a sense of order and purpose in a world where life was often brutal and short. They were a way to make sense of the chaos, to find meaning in the madness. This blend of romance and realism is precisely why these stories continue to captivate us today. They offer a tantalizing escape into a world where the impossible becomes possible, where gods and giants walk the earth, and where the line between myth and reality is as blurred as a stormy horizon. Yet, beneath the fantastical veneer lies a core of truth, a reflection of our own struggles and triumphs. As we've seen, Norse mythology has left an indelible mark on modern culture. From J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle-earth, inspired by the epic landscapes of the sagas, to Neil Gaiman's American Gods, where old deities grapple with the challenges of contemporary life, these myths continue to inspire and intrigue. Their influence is woven into the fabric of our stories, a testament to their enduring power and appeal. Yet, it's important to remember that the myths are more than just entertainment. They are a reflection of the values and beliefs of a people who faced the harsh realities of life with courage and resilience. For the Norse, The guards were not distant figures in a celestial pantheon. They were active participants in the drama of existence, their stories intertwined with the fate of humanity. The myths were a guide to living in a world that was as unpredictable as it was beautiful, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, there is always hope. So, as we wrap up our exploration of Norse mythology, let's take a moment to reflect on its lasting legacy. These ancient tales have transcended time and space, resonating with audiences across the globe. They've been reshaped and reimagined, yet their core themes remain as relevant today as they were 1,000 years ago. The gods and heroes of the Norse sagas continue to inspire us, their stories a reminder of the power of imagination and the enduring strength of the human spirit. In the end, Norse mythology is not just a relic of the past. It's a living tradition, a testament to the power of storytelling to transcend the boundaries of time and place. Whether we're watching Thor battle it out on the big screen or reading about Odin's quest for wisdom, these stories continue to captivate us, offering a glimpse into a world where anything is possible. And as long as we continue to tell these tales, the myths will live on, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always the promise of a new dawn. So next time you find yourself gazing up at the stars, remember that you're not just looking at distant suns. You're seeing the same constellations that once guided Norse sailors across uncharted seas. In those twinkling lights, the stories of gods and heroes still dance across the sky, their legacy as bright and enduring as the stars themselves. And perhaps, in their stories, we find a bit of our own, weaving the fabric of our shared human experience. The rooster's crow is your alarm clock, echoing through the stone walls of the caravanserai, a medieval version of a luxury pit stop. The air is a cocktail of spices, animal musk, and the faint hint of last night's campfires. You rise, not from a plush bed, but a simple mat that's seen better days. But hey, it's not like you're on a luxury cruise. You're on the Silk Road, the ancient superhighway of trade. As you shake off the sleep, you're in the company of traders, adventurers, possibly the odd spy, each with their own plans, dreams, and schemes. This caravanserai, a bustling fortress of commerce and camaraderie, is a key player in the Silk Road saga. Think of it as a medieval truck stop, minus the greasy fries and neon signs. These places are strategically scattered every 20 to 30 miles along the route, about a day's journey by camel, or what you'd call a step too far for a walk these days. You're currently in one of the big players, maybe in Samarkand or Bukhara, cities whose names are legends in themselves. They were the ancient world's equivalent of New York or Shanghai, pulsing with life and trade. As you wander through the caravanserai, you're met with a sensory overload. Merchants from across Asia, the Middle East, and even Europe are here, their goods spilling forth in a riot of colors and textures. Silk, of course, is the headliner, light as a whisper and strong as a promise. But don't let the name fool you. The Silk Road is about much more than just silk. There are spices from India, ivory from Africa, and gold from the Roman Empire. You might even spot a diplomat or two, carrying letters and news between empires, because who needs Twitter when you've got the Silk Road? You might be tempted to romanticize this life, envisioning yourself as a Marco Polo of sorts. But let's burst that bubble real quick. Life on the Silk Road isn't all treasure maps and adventure tales. It's hard work. The road is long, the climate harsh, and the bandits ever-present. Yet this is the nerve center of ancient global trade, a place where cultures collide and fortunes are made and lost. The sheer diversity of goods is nothing short of mind-boggling. Imagine laying your eyes on porcelain from China for the first time, or inhaling the heady scent of Arabian frankincense. It's a time before mass production, where every item tells a story of its own journey. Now, let's talk economics because, let's face it, without cold, hard cash, or gold, or silver, or whatever shiny object is the currency of choice, none of this would happen. The Silk Road is more than a trade route. It's the internet of the ancient world, connecting far-flung empires and tiny villages alike. Samarkand and Chang'an, modern-day Xi'an, aren't just dots on a map. They're hubs of innovation and power. Chang'an, for instance, is the capital of the Tang dynasty, a city with a population of over 1 million at its peak. It's an economic powerhouse and a cultural melting pot where poets and warriors alike rub shoulders in its tea houses and marketplaces. Trade along the Silk Road is a complex beast. Goods flow east to west and back again, but it's not just tangible items on the move. Ideas, religions, and technologies hitch a ride, too. Buddhism spreads from India to China, while papermaking travels in the opposite direction. You can thank the Silk Road for the spread of the compass and gunpowder, inventions that will eventually change the world in ways no one here could predict. And let's not forget the darker side of this connectivity. Diseases also travel these routes, with the bubonic plague making its grim journey from Asia to Europe along these very paths. By now, the caravanserai is fully awake, a symphony of voices bargaining, laughing, and occasionally arguing over prices. You see a merchant haggling over a bolt of silk, his voice rising and falling like a song. Negotiation is an art form here, and everyone's a performer. It's a dance of words, where price isn't just about cost, but about respect and reputation. Walking through this maze of stalls, you're not just a spectator. You're part of a living history, a chain of commerce that stretches back centuries. As you join the morning rituals, you might participate in a shared breakfast. Maybe it's a simple meal of flatbread and cheese, washed down with tea. Simple, yet sustaining, it's a meal that fuels the body for the long day ahead, and you'll need it. Today's leg of the journey could take you through mountain passes or across desert plains, each step reminding you of the vastness of this endeavor. The Silk Road is not just a route, it's a lifeline, a testament to human ambition and resilience. In this world, the myth and the reality coexist, each feeding into the other. Yes, the Silk Road is a place of legendary adventures, but it's also a gritty testament to human endurance. It's a place where the romance of travel collides with the stark realities of survival. Yet, as you prepare to set out, you can't help but feel a sense of wonder. You're part of something bigger, a vast network of trade and culture that spans continents and centuries. And that, my friend, is truly something to marvel at. And so, with a belly full of bread and dreams, you step outside the caravanserai's protective walls and into the open expanse of the Silk Road, ready to face whatever the day throws your way. But let's talk about your ride because, spoiler alert, you're not exactly cruising in style. No cushy seats or horsepower here, just actual horsepower. Camels, the ships of the desert, are your steadfast companions on this journey. These creatures are built to endure, with their iconic humps storing fat, not water, despite popular belief. Imagine trekking with a living water bottle that doesn't need constant refills. Camels can cover about 25 miles a day, give or take, which is a leisurely pace compared to your average Netflix binge-watch marathon. This speed might not win any races, but it's perfect for navigating the varied landscapes of the Silk Road. But it's not just camels making the journey. Horses, mules, and even yaks join this motley caravan, each chosen for their unique strengths. Horses are the Ferraris of the ancient world, fast, but requiring more maintenance, like a high-maintenance sports car. Yaks are the unsung heroes of the mountainous regions, their shaggy coats perfect for cold climates. Each animal is a piece of the logistical puzzle, ensuring that goods and people move efficiently across hundreds of miles. Now, as you settle into the dusty rhythm of the road, you might be tempted to romanticize the experience. The idea of riding through sweeping landscapes under endless skies sounds poetic, right? But let's rip the veil off that illusion. The reality is far grittier. You're not just dealing with picturesque sunsets. You're battling sunburn, sandstorms, and the occasional rogue pebble trying to sabotage your sandal. And the dust, oh, the dust. It gets everywhere. You're basically carrying a mini desert in your clothes by the end of the day. Then there's the heat. The sun doesn't just shine. It swelters, turning the ground into a stove and your brain into a slow-cooked stew of thoughts. You might find yourself fantasizing less about adventure and more about the next shade-providing tree. And let's not forget the unexpected detours. A washed-out path, a sudden sandstorm, or a herd of stubborn goats could easily throw your plans into disarray, reminding you that Mother Nature is the original prankster. Every caravan has its own cast of characters, each playing a crucial part in this moving tapestry of trade. The merchants, of course, are the stars of the show, their fortunes riding on the safe delivery of goods. They haggle over prices and calculate profits, always weighing the risk of banditry against potential gain. Guides are the GPS of the ancient world, using their knowledge of the terrain and the stars to keep the caravan on course. These folks could navigate a labyrinth with their eyes closed, their knowledge passed down through generations. And then there are the guards. With bandits lurking in the shadows, These warriors are the thin line between you and a very unpleasant encounter. Armed with bows, swords, and a keen survival instinct, they ensure the caravan's safety. Let's just say they are the bouncers of this medieval club, keeping the riffraff at bay. In this ancient dance of commerce, danger is always just a heartbeat away. Bandits are a constant threat, not just mythical bogeymen, but real opportunistic thieves who see your caravan as a walking treasure chest. The caravans are armed and ready, but every skirmish carries the risk of losing not just goods, but lives. Meanwhile, profit margins are as tight as a drum. Merchants live in a world of risk and reward, where a single bad trade could mean financial ruin. It's a high-stakes game of chess, where each move is calculated, and every decision carries weight. As you journey, the landscape changes from desert plains to lush valleys, each stretch offering its own challenges and rewards. The road is a living entity, shifting with the seasons and the whims of weather. You're not just traversing a path, you're navigating a world shaped by centuries of trade and travel. Each step forward is a step back in time, revealing layers of history beneath your feet. Even the night offers no true respite. When the sun dips below the horizon, the temperature plummets, and you find yourself huddling closer to the campfire. The stars above offer some consolation, twinkling like ancient beacons, guiding your thoughts to distant lands. It's a reminder that you're part of something bigger, a vast network of trade and culture that spans continents and centuries. But don't let the romance fool you. The Silk Road is a gritty testament to human endurance, a place where the dreams of adventure collide with the stark realities of survival. Yet, as the caravan settles down for the night, the camaraderie among travelers brings a sense of warmth that no fire could ever match. You're not just a solitary traveler, you're part of a community, bound by the shared experience of the road. And with that, the caravan drifts into an uneasy sleep, the sounds of the night a soothing lullaby for those brave enough to dream. Because on the Silk Road, dreams are the fuel that propels you forward, transforming dust and sweat into stories that will echo through the halls of history. And as you close your eyes, you can't help but wonder what tomorrow will bring on this ancient highway of hope and hardship. As the first rays of dawn light the horizon, the caravan stirs awake, ready to face another day on this ancient highway of hope and hardship. But let's not sugarcoat it. It's a highway with more potholes than a neglected city street. The Silk Road is a place where dreams can turn into nightmares faster than you can say Marco Polo. Speaking of our Venetian friend, let's take a peek behind the curtain of his legendary tales. Marco Polo, the original travel influencer, painted a picture of his adventures that would make even Instagram blush. But was he more storyteller than explorer? Some scholars think so, and with good reason. Polo claimed to have spent 24 years gallivanting across Asia, rubbing elbows with the likes of Kublai Khan. Yet, his accounts are suspiciously vague when it comes to certain details, like the Great Wall of China. Did he really walk the walk, or was he just talking the talk? His travels became a medieval bestseller, but some argue it's more fiction than fact, an ancient version of clickbait. The truth may lie somewhere in between, but the mystique of the Silk Road, with its blend of reality and legend, is part of its enduring allure. Now, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of what it meant to journey across these treacherous paths. The Silk Road wasn't just a trade route, it was a gauntlet of challenges. And the first challenge on your itinerary, bandits. Oh yes, these guys were the original highwaymen, ready to relieve you of your worldly possessions with a smile or a sword. Imagine you're a merchant, your camels loaded with precious silk, spices, or maybe even a shipment of the latest Tang Dynasty pottery. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a band of bandits descends like a scene from an action movie. Only you're the unwilling star. This is where you thank your lucky stars for the medieval equivalent of insurance, protection money. Forget about cozy Allstate ads. This was more like a mafia shakedown. Pay up and you might pass unscathed. Refuse and, well, hope you're good at running. Caravans often hired guards for extra muscle, but it was a constant game of cat and mouse. The bandits were cunning, knowing when and where to strike. For them, the Silk Road was a buffet of opportunities, and they were always hungry. But bandits weren't the only headache. Political dynamics played a starring role in shaping the fortunes of traders. The Mongol Empire, under the leadership of Genghis Khan and his successors, was both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, the Pax Mongolica, peace imposed by the Mongols, made the Silk Road safer than it had been in centuries. Trade flourished under their rule as the empire stretched from China to the edges of Europe. With one political entity controlling vast swaths of territory, the road was more unified, and traders could move with relative freedom. Yet the Mongols weren't exactly known for their gentle diplomacy. Their empire was built on a foundation of conquest and fear. Defy them, and you'd be lucky to escape with your life. The Mongol postal system, though, was a marvel of efficiency. Think of it as the medieval FedEx, complete with relay stations and swift riders. It kept information and goods flowing, a critical infrastructure that helped maintain their vast empire. But political stability was a double-edged sword. While it smoothed the path for traders, it also meant that power was concentrated, and with it, the ability to levy taxes and tolls. Every city, every pass, every bridge had its price. Merchants navigated a minefield of tariffs, each one nibbling away at their profits. And the chaos didn't end there. The fall of the Mongol Empire in the 14th century turned the Silk Road into a patchwork quilt of warring states and petty kingdoms, each with its own agenda and appetite for tribute. The ebb and flow of political power could make or break a merchant. One day your goods are passing smoothly through the empire, the next they are held hostage by a local warlord. It's a high-stakes game where fortunes could be lost at the whim of a capricious ruler. Yet, despite these challenges, the Silk Road continued to pulse with life, a testament to human resilience and ingenuity. Back to our friend Marco Polo, who wasn't just spinning yarns for the sake of it. His stories, embellished or not, captured the imagination of Europe. They painted a picture of the East as a land of untold riches and exotic customs. Polo's accounts didn't just entertain, they inspired a generation of explorers and traders, eager to find their own fortunes. His travels, real or fictional, helped to bridge the gap between East and West, sparking a curiosity that would eventually lead to the age of exploration. So, as you make your way across the Silk Road, navigating its challenges and embracing its opportunities, you're not just a traveler. You're a link in a chain that stretches back through centuries. You're part of a story that blends myth and reality, a journey that transcends time and place. The Silk Road is more than a route. It's a testament to the enduring human spirit, a saga of adventure, ambition, and survival. As the day unfolds, you're reminded that every step you take is a step in the footsteps of history, a journey that's as much about discovering the world as it is about discovering yourself. And so, with the sun climbing higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the road ahead, you steel yourself for whatever the day may bring. Because on the Silk Road, every day is a new adventure, a new chapter in a story that's still being written. So, as the sun climbs higher, you find yourself trudging into an oasis town, a green gem in the gritty necklace that is the Silk Road. This isn't just any pit stop. It's a vibrant bazaar of languages, scents, and sounds. Think of it as the ancient world's version of a cultural TED talk, only with more camels and fewer PowerPoint slides. These oasis towns are lifelines in the desert, and you're just one of countless weary travelers seeking shade, water, and maybe a slice of civilization. The town buzzes with the sounds of haggling, an art form as intricate as any silk weaving. Merchants, locals, and travelers swap goods and stories, each transaction a tiny cog in the massive machine of global trade. Now, let's drop some numbers on you. Imagine hundreds of traders passing through daily, their goods part of an economic exchange that, at its peak, saw silk being traded for spices, spices for silver, silver for ideas. And that's just the tip of the iceberg lettuce. This isn't just a shopping spree for the ancient elite. It's a symphony of supply and demand that would make Adam Smith proud. As you wander, it becomes clear that these towns are more than refueling stations. They're cultural melting pots where the world's ideas, religions, and fashion trends mingle like guests, a particularly eclectic house party. Here, you might overhear a Buddhist monk debating philosophy with a Persian scholar or catch sight of an Indian trader sporting the latest in Tang dynasty chic. It's the original multicultural runway, where silk saris brush past Arabian robes, and everyone's got a story. But let's not get too starry-eyed. Alongside the romantic allure, there's the gritty reality of commerce. The Silk Road isn't just a conduit for goods, it's a superhighway for germs. Diseases hitch rides on unsuspecting traders, spreading plagues that can decimate populations faster than you can say, quarantine. The Black Death, that medieval Grim Reaper, traveled these very routes, cutting a swath through Europe that left historians and grave diggers flummoxed. Yet it wasn't all doom and gloom. The Silk Road was also the birthplace of countless innovations. Paper-making, compass navigation, and gunpowder. All these game-changers hitched rides along this dusty thoroughfare, transforming societies in ways that would echo through time. Imagine a world where you're scribbling notes on parchment instead of paper, or navigating the seas by sheer guesswork. Not a pretty picture, right? And let's talk about the goods themselves. Silk, the headliner, was the ancient world's equivalent of a luxury sports car, coveted, costly, and a status symbol. The Romans, in particular, went gaga over silk, despite, or perhaps because of, the fact that it cost an arm and a toga. By the 1st century AD, silk was so popular in Rome that the Senate tried to ban it, claiming it was indecent and draining the empire's coffers faster than a tax collector on payday. Spices, meanwhile, were the edible gold of the ancient world. Cloves, cinnamon, and pepper weren't just for flavor. They were preservatives, medicines, even aphrodisiacs. A pound of pepper could buy you a slave, while a cargo hold full of spices was basically a floating treasure chest. These weren't just culinary luxuries. They were economic powerhouses driving empires to the brink of obsession. As you rest in the shade, sipping on a cup of tea, another Silk Road gift to the world, you realize the journey is about more than just survival. It's about connection. It's a highway for human curiosity, where knowledge and culture flow with the same zeal as traders hawking their wares. You're not just a traveler. You're a participant in a grand exchange of ideas, a living thread in the tapestry of human history. And as the sun begins its descent, casting long shadows over the bustling bazaar, you gather your goods and prepare to continue your journey. The Silk Road awaits, an endless scroll of possibility, its pages filled with untold stories and undiscovered wonders. Because on this ancient highway, every step forward is a step into the unknown, a step into the heartbeat of history itself. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, you finally arrive at your destination, another bustling oasis town, a microcosm of the Silk Road's grandeur and grit. It's a relief to step off the dusty path, your bones weary from the constant jostling of the caravan. You've been on the road for what feels like an eternity, but in reality, it's been just a fraction of the year-long journeys some traders endure. The air is filled with the scent of exotic spices and the sound of haggling merchants, a symphony of commerce that never seems to rest. After securing a spot in yet another caravanserai, you can't help but reflect on the sheer impact of this journey. The Silk Road isn't merely a trade route. It's a force of nature, an artery of human ambition and cultural exchange. Over its history, it has witnessed the rise and fall of empires, each leaving their mark on the tapestry of human civilization. Cities like Samarkand and Kashgar transformed from mere darts on a map into thriving metropolises, their wealth and power fueled by the constant flow of trade. These cities were not just way stations. They were engines of economic and cultural innovation, their marketplaces a blend of the exotic and the familiar. Consider this. At the height of the Silk Road's influence, the city of Samarkand was a dazzling beacon of prosperity, its streets teeming with scholars, artists, and traders. By the 14th century, its population had swelled to around 100,000, a bustling hub by medieval standards. Yet, as the Silk Road shifted and political landscapes morphed, many of these cities faced decline. The rise of maritime trade routes in the late 15th century, spurred by explorers like Vasco da Gama, marked the beginning of the end for these overland corridors. The Silk Road, once the lifeline of the East-West exchange, gradually faded into the annals of history, leaving behind ghost towns and forgotten trails. But let's not get lost in nostalgia. The Silk Road's legacy is as complex as the route itself. It wasn't just about goods and gold, though those were certainly the headline acts. It was a superhighway for ideas, religions, and technologies, shaping societies in ways we're still unraveling today. The spread of Buddhism from India to China, for example, was more than the journey of monks and manuscripts. It was a profound cultural shift that transformed societies along the way. And let's not forget the culinary delights that made their way across continents. Ever wonder how your dinner plate became a global tapestry of flavors? Thank the Silk Road, the original food delivery service, for introducing spices and ingredients that revolutionized diets worldwide. Now, let's talk romance versus reality. The Silk Road conjures images of adventure, mystery, and discovery, but the reality was often far less glamorous. The romantic notion of the Silk Road as a pathway to untold wealth is a bit of a fairy tale. Yes, fortunes were made, but not without risk, and often ruin. Bandits, harsh climates, and unpredictable politics loomed large over every journey. The romanticized image of the lone traveler discovering new worlds is more Hollywood than history. The truth is, the Silk Road was a gritty, dangerous undertaking where survival often trumped discovery. Yet, despite the hardships, the allure of the Silk Road is undeniable. It captured the imagination of explorers and merchants alike, offering a tantalizing glimpse into the unknown. In many ways, it laid the groundwork for today's globalized world, where goods, ideas, and cultures continue to flow across borders with dizzying speed. The interconnectedness we take for granted today has roots in those ancient trails, where traders and travelers forged links that would eventually span the globe. In the cool evening air, as you sit among fellow travelers exchanging tales of the road, you realize that the Silk Road is more than a relic of the past. It's a testament to human resilience and the relentless drive to connect, trade, and explore. This ancient route didn't just move silk and spices. It moved humanity forward, bridging gaps and sparking curiosity. And while the Silk Road as it once was may have faded into history, its spirit lives on in every journey, every trade, and every cultural exchange that defines our world today. So, as you close your eyes, drifting into a well-earned sleep, remember that the Silk Road was not just about the destination, but the journey itself. A journey that continues to shape the world in ways both seen and unseen. Because in the end, the Silk Road was more than a map of trade routes. It was a map of human ambition, charting the course for a future where the world is just a little bit smaller and a lot more connected. Sun is barely stretching its golden fingers over the Aegean Sea, and you're already up, standing on the rocky shores of ancient Crete around 2000 BCE. The morning air is as crisp as the olives you'll soon be hauling to trade, and the sea breeze carries the faint scent of salt and adventure. You're not just a fisherman. You're part of a bustling maritime network that makes Crete a Mediterranean heavyweight. This isn't just an island. It's a busy hub in the Bronze Age, where trade routes crisscross like some ancient GPS gone wild. Crete, your home, is more than just a pretty face with its stunning coastline. It's strategically positioned smack dab in the middle of the Aegean Sea, a prime real estate in the Bronze Age world. Those Minoan ports you frequent are buzzing with activity, a cacophony of shouts in various languages that would make a modern-day stock exchange sound like a lullaby. Here, trade routes converge like an ancient freeway, bringing in treasures from distant lands and sending out the fruits of your labor. Speaking of labor, let's talk about the economy. It's the lifeblood of your existence and the reason you're up at this ungodly hour. The sea trade is the big cheese here, with goods like olive oil and pottery flowing through the ports faster than you can say, linear A. Olive oil isn't just for drizzling over your dinner. It's a liquid gold that fuels lamps, perfumes, and even skincare routines, if you can believe it. Pottery, on the other hand, is the Tupperware of your time, essential for storing and transporting goods across the sea. You're not just fishing for a living. You're a cog in the wheel of a vast economic engine, keeping the island's trade and culture spinning smoothly. Now, let's tackle the romanticized image of the noble ancient fisherman head-on. Sure, it sounds poetic, and all but reality. It's about as glamorous as a clay pot full of fish guts. Your work is grueling, and days start before the sun and end long after it's set. You haul in nets that weigh more than a couple of amphoras, deal with the whims of the sea, and hope the guards are in a good mood. The only thing noble about this gig is the amount of muscle you've built lugging around your catch. But oh, how the sea calls to you with its siren song. As you push your boat off the shore, the rhythmic slapping of the waves is both a challenge and a comfort. The Aegean isn't just a backdrop to your life. It's a demanding boss with temperamental moods, sometimes generous, sometimes stingy. You know every nook and cranny of this coast like the back of your sunburned hand, each inlet and bay mapped in your mind. Sure, the romanticized ideal of the ancient fisherman paints you as a gentle soul, communing with the waves, but the truth is, you're more like an ancient entrepreneur, navigating the tides of commerce and survival. You're not just casting nets. You're playing the ancient stock market, betting on a good catch while keeping an eye on the shifting economic tides. The stakes are high, but so is the payoff when the guards of the sea smile upon you. Back on shore, the Minoan ports are alive with the sound of trade, a symphony of bartering and bargaining that would impress even the savviest modern-day negotiator. As you unload your catch, you're aware of the bigger picture, the vast web of trade that connects you to far-off lands. Those parts of olive oil and amphoras of wine are as much a part of this world as the fish you bring in. It's a delicate balance of supply and demand, and you're a key player in this ancient economic dance. And let's not forget about the social scene. The ports are where news travels fastest, where gossip and stories are exchanged along with goods. You're as much a part of the community as the pottery and olive oil, your stories woven into the tapestry of everyday life. The Minoan culture thrives on this exchange, not just of goods, but of ideas and innovations, making Crete a cultural melting pot long before the term was coined. As the day progresses, the sun climbs higher, casting a warm glow over the island. The scent of the sea mingles with the earthy aroma of the olive groves, a reminder of the land's bounty that complements the sea's gifts. You're not just a fisherman, you're a vital link in the chain that keeps this island's heart beating, a part of something larger than yourself. In this ancient world, where the line between myth and reality blurs like the horizon at dusk, you stand grounded in the gritty reality of your work. You're not just chasing fish. You're chasing dreams of a better life, knowing that each catch brings you closer to the prosperity that fuels the island's wealth. As the sun begins its descent, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, you head back to shore, your boat heavy with the day's haul. The horizon might be the same one your ancestors gazed upon, but every day it's a new adventure, a new chapter in the story of Crete. You've faced the challenges of the sea and the demands of trade, and as you step onto solid ground, you know that tomorrow will bring fresh opportunities and new stories to tell. And there you have it, life on ancient Crete, not as a mere romanticized notion, but as a vibrant part of a thriving economic and cultural ecosystem. The sea is your livelihood, your challenge, and your muse, offering both hardship and hope. As you close the chapter on another day, you know that you're part of a history that's as deep and complex as the waters you navigate. So, here's to you, the ancient fisherman, the unsung hero of Crete's bustling, vibrant Bronze Age world. As the horizon swallows the sun, leaving a trail of fiery colors behind, you find yourself back on the shore, your boat groaning under the weight of the day's catch. But before you can call it a day, let's rewind a bit and take a closer look at the nuts and bolts, or rather, the wood and sinew, of your seafaring life. Welcome to the world of ancient Cretan fishing, where the tools of the trade are as fascinating as the tales they help spin. First up, your trusty vessel, the Minoan boat. Now, don't let anyone tell you these boats were just oversized bathtubs. Archaeological finds have shown that these babies were the real deal, built primarily from cypress wood, because apparently that's what Poseidon ordered. They were the lifeline between you and the sea's bounty. A typical fishing boat was about 6 to 8 meters long, a far cry from the luxury yachts of today, but hey, it got the job done. These boats were light enough to be dragged ashore, yet sturdy enough to face the temperamental Aegean. Picture a wooden canoe on steroids, with a single mast and a square sail made of linen or wool. Not exactly the love boat, but it had character. Next, let's dive into the fishing gear, which, believe it or not, hasn't changed dramatically over the millennia. Your nets were woven from flax or hemp, crafted meticulously by hand. These weren't your garden variety nets. They were weighted with clay or stone to sink in the water, a design choice that archaeologists have found reflected in tiny clay weights strewn across ancient shores like breadcrumbs from a fishy Hansel and Gretel. And let's not forget about the hooks, which were usually made from bone or bronze, because nothing says, I mean business, like a sharp piece of metal on the end of a line. Now, navigating these waters wasn't just a matter of setting sail and hoping for the best. The sea, as any seasoned sailor will tell you, has a mind of its own. The Aegean Sea, with its unpredictable weather, could go from calm to chaos faster than you can say, ancient mariner. One minute you're gliding over serene blue waves, and the next, you're white-knuckling the helm as the wind whips around you like an angry banshee. The risks were real. Capsizing was a genuine hazard, and let's face it, the concept of a life jacket wasn't exactly on the radar just yet. You had to rely on your wits, your instincts, and a hefty dose of luck. And speaking of luck, Did you know that even back in the Bronze Age, there were rules to the game? According to the Linear B tablets, those ancient clay post-it notes, the Minoans had something akin to fishing quotas and regulations. This wasn't just a free-for-all fish fest. There were limits to what you could catch and where. It's almost comforting to know that even thousands of years ago, someone was watching to make sure you didn't overfish the local cod population. Granted, they were more concerned about maintaining a steady supply for religious offerings and royal feasts than ecological balance. But hey, a regulation is a regulation. So, while the romantic image of a fisherman leisurely casting his nets into the sea is all well and good, the reality was a tad more gritty. This was no idyllic day at the beach. It was a job, with all the dirt, sweat, and occasional terror that entails. The sea might have been your muse, but it was also your taskmaster, demanding respect and offering little mercy. You had to be part sailor, part meteorologist, and full-time pragmatist to make it through. And then there's the notion of simpler times. Ah, yes, the idea that life back in the day was one long, lazy afternoon under the sun. Let's put that myth to bed, shall we? Between the physical demands, the constant threat of bad weather, and the need to keep up with the latest maritime regulations, life was anything but simple. Sure, there wasn't any social media to worry about, but when the biggest challenge of your day is not becoming fish food, those modern headaches seem a little less pressing. As you haul your nets back to the shore, filled with the day's catch, you can't help but feel a sense of accomplishment, and maybe a bit of exhaustion. The sea has been generous today, but tomorrow is another story, another gamble. The life of an ancient fisherman was a delicate balance between fortune and skill, between the pull of the tides and the push of survival. In a world where myths are woven as tightly as the nets, it's easy to get swept away by the romance of it all. But as you stand on the shore, watching the waves lap at your feet, you know that the true story is one of grit and perseverance, of a life lived at the mercy of the sea's whims. So, here's to you, the ancient mariner, navigating the choppy waters of commerce and nature, a hero in your own right, charting a course through the annals of history. And as the stars begin to twinkle in the night sky, you find solace in the rhythmic lull of the waves, knowing that while the sea is unpredictable, your place within its embrace remains steadfast. As the stars begin to twinkle in the night sky, you find solace in the rhythmic lull of the waves, knowing that while the sea is unpredictable, your place within its embrace remains steadfast. Now, though, it's time to pivot from the open sea to the bustling energy of the Minoan markets. After all, fish don't sell themselves, and neither do you. Back on the shore, your boat sits like a small mountain of piscine promise. The catch is sorted, and with the efficiency of a well-rehearsed dance, you and your fellow fishermen prepare to bring the bounty to market. Forget about the romance of leisurely strolls with baskets of fish. This is a logistical operation worthy of a Bronze Age, Ocean's 11. The local market is a sensory overload. It's not just a place to haggle over prices. It's the heart of the community, where gossip flows as freely as the olive oil. And here's where the economic dynamics really get juicy. Picture a scene that rivals any modern trading floor, albeit with more fish scales and less air conditioning. Buyers and sellers engage in a verbal tug-of-war, each side skilled in the ancient art of negotiation. The stakes: fresh fish versus a handful of bronze coins, or maybe a jug of the good stuff, wine. Now, let's debunk a myth or two about the market scene. Women aren't just bystanders here. They're active participants, running stalls and making deals with the best of them. The idea that ancient societies relegated women to the sidelines is as outdated as a rotary phone. In Minoan Crete, women played vital roles in the economy, from agriculture to trade. The fish market was no exception. Women often took the helm in the selling process, their sharp tongues and sharper wits cutting through the cacophony like a dolphin through the waves. But let's address the elephant, or rather, octopus, in the room, the ancient supply chain. If you think today's logistical nightmares are bad, try moving perishable goods without refrigeration or reliable transport. Fish don't stay fresh forever, and in a world without ice trucks, timing is everything. The clock starts ticking the moment the fish leaves the water, and every delay brings you closer to a smelly disaster. To combat this, Minoans relied on an intricate network of trade routes and savvy planning. Sure, they weren't tracking shipments with GPS, but they had something arguably better: local knowledge and community networks. You knew who to trust and who'd try to palm off the previous day's catch as fresh. And while we're on the topic of community, let's not overlook the social interactions that made these markets more than just economic hubs. They were the Facebook of the ancient world, where news, gossip, and the occasional scandal were shared with the same vigor as the latest catch. You could learn more about your neighbors in an afternoon at the market than in a month of quiet observation. Yet, despite their critical role in the economy, fishermen didn't exactly bask in the glow of societal reverence. Sure, you were necessary, but let's face it, fishermen weren't the rock stars of Minoan society. The palatial elites, with their fancy rituals and grand feasts, were the ones who got the statues and the songs. You, meanwhile, were more like the roadies, essential but largely invisible. But while the upper crust might not sing your praises, you know the truth. The island's prosperity hinges on your ability to navigate both the sea and the market. The fish you catch feeds the people, fuels the economy, and even plays a part in religious ceremonies, where offerings to the gods are thought to bring favor and good fortune. So, as you stand amidst the din of the market, haggling over the price of a particularly impressive sea base, remember that you're not just a cog in a machine. You're a vital part of a complex web of commerce and culture, where every sale and trade is a thread in the tapestry of Minoan life. And let's not forget the family dynamics at play here. Fishing is often a family affair, with everyone from toddlers to grandparents pitching in. Kids learn the trade from a young age, absorbing the rhythms of the sea and the market like they absorb the warmth of the Cretan sun. It's a way of life passed down through generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story. The market winds down as the sun dips below the horizon, but the work isn't over yet. You still have to settle accounts, make plans for the next day, and maybe sneak in a bit of gossip before heading home. It's exhausting, sure, but it's also exhilarating. A dance of commerce and community that keeps the island's heart beating strong. As you gather your things and prepare to leave, the market fades into the background noise of the town, a living, breathing entity that will do it all again tomorrow. You walk away with a lighter load, your pockets a little heavier with bronze, and your mind buzzing with the day's events. So, here's to you, the ancient mariner turned market maven, navigating not just the waves, but the intricate currents of human interaction and economic survival. As you head home to rest, ready to face whatever tomorrow brings, you carry with you the knowledge that you're part of something larger, a community, a culture, and a history that will echo through the ages. And as you make your way home through the bustling streets of ancient Crete, the scent of salt still clinging to your skin, it's time to reflect on how your seafaring endeavors ripple through the broader tapestry of Minoan life. Because let's face it, those fish you just sold aren't just dinner. They're a cornerstone of an intricate social, cultural, and political web. First, let's talk art and religion, where the sea wasn't just a backdrop. It was practically a deity. The Minoans didn't just appreciate the sea, they worshipped it, celebrating its bounty in vibrant frescoes that adorned the walls of their palaces. Take the famous dolphin fresco at Narsos, for instance. This isn't just a pretty picture of marine life. It's a testament to the profound relationship between the Minoans and the sea. Dolphins, fish, and even octopuses were painted with such detail and liveliness that you'd think they were about to swim right off the wall. These artworks weren't just decorative, they were symbolic, serving as reminders of the sea's importance to everyday life and divine favor. And speaking of divine favor, let's not forget the religious angle. Fish weren't just for eating, they were offerings to the gods, part of elaborate rituals that blended commerce with spirituality. Temples and sanctuaries often featured sea motifs, reflecting the belief that the ocean was a conduit to the divine. The sea, in all its glory and terror, was seen as both a giver and a taker. A bit like that fickle friend who always has the latest gossip but never picks up the tab. But hold onto your amphoras, because we're about to dive deeper into the murky waters of Minoan politics. You see, those romantic depictions of a peaceful Minoan utopia, they're about as accurate as a paper map in a rainstorm. Sure, the Minoans were renowned for their advanced civilization, their sophisticated art, and their bustling trade networks, but peace-loving hippies they were not. The Mediterranean was a hotbed of political intrigue and military tension, and the Minoans were right in the thick of it. To truly understand the Minoans' place in this ancient world, you need to consider their naval prowess. The Minoans weren't just trading fish and olive oil. They were controlling the seas, maintaining a thalassocracy, a maritime empire that wielded influence across the Aegean. This wasn't a peaceful trade agreement. It was the ancient version of a naval arms race. The Minoans had ships that could outmaneuver and outlast those of their rivals, securing trade routes, and occasionally flexing their maritime muscles in power plays. And let's not sugarcoat it. Economic tensions were as common as olive trees in Crete. The Minoans' economic success was built on a delicate balance of trade and diplomacy with neighboring powers like Egypt and the Hittites. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The Mediterranean economy was as volatile as the sea itself, with alliances shifting faster than a school of sardines evading a predator. One minute, you're best buds with the Egyptians, and the next, you're on the outs over a shipment of grain or a misinterpreted diplomatic gesture. And what about the myth of Minoan dominance? Sure, they had their glory days, but the Minoan political landscape was more Game of Thrones than a fairy tale. The island of Crete was divided into a patchwork of city-states, each with its own ruler, its own interests, and, inevitably, its own conflicts. The so-called Minoan unity was more of a fragile coalition held together by trade interests than a harmonious commonwealth. Let's talk numbers for a second. The palatial complexes, like Knossos and Phaistos, weren't just architectural wonders. They were economic powerhouses. These sprawling centers were the administrative heartbeats of Minoan society, managing resources, production, and distribution with a level of sophistication that would make a modern-day logistics manager weep with envy. But this complexity came at a cost. The Minoan elite, who lived in these palaces, were engaged in constant power plays, using their wealth and influence to maintain control. The cost of maintaining such grandeur was high, both in terms of resources and the socio-political maneuvering required to keep everything running smoothly. And here's where the narrative gets even more tangled. While the image of Minoan Crete as a peaceful utopia persists in popular imagination, archaeological evidence tells a different story. Weapons like swords and daggers have been found in Minoan sites, and fortifications suggest they were prepared for conflict. The Minoans weren't just peaceful traders, they were also warriors when needed, defending their interests in a world where the balance of power was as unstable as the tectonic plates beneath their feet. The myth of the peaceful Minoan society is as alluring as a siren song, but the reality is far more nuanced. They were a people who thrived on trade and diplomacy, yes, but they also understood the harsh realities of their world. The Minoans knew that a strong economy required not just skilled sailors and craftsmen, but also a willingness to defend their interests with force if necessary. As the sun sets over the Aegean, casting a golden glow over the ancient landscape, it's clear that the story of Minoan Crete is one of complexity and contradiction. It's a tale of a society that was as dynamic as the sea they sailed, navigating the shifting tides of fortune with a deftness that belied the romanticized image of a peaceful paradise. So, as you head home, the days catch behind you and the promise of tomorrow's challenges ahead, remember that you're part of a legacy that's as rich and varied as the sea itself. The Minoans weren't just artisans or traders. They were pioneers, navigating the intricate dance of culture, commerce, and conflict in a world that was as unpredictable as the waves they rode. And as you finally reach your home, tired but satisfied, you know that while the myths may paint a picture of an idealized past, the true story of Minoan life is one of resilience, adaptability, and the enduring human spirit. It's a story that continues to echo through the annals of history, as vibrant and alive as the frescoes that once adorned the walls of Knossos. So here's to you, the modern-day explorer of history, uncovering the truths behind the myths and celebrating the real, gritty, and glorious tapestry of human experience. As you finally reach your home, tired but satisfied, it's time to cast our nets one last time into the deep waters of Minoan legacy and decline. Because while the sea gave generously, it also took its toll, both on the environment and the society it sustained. You see, fishing in ancient Crete wasn't just about reeling in dinner. It was a critical piece of the economic puzzle that ultimately contributed to the grand tapestry of Minoan civilization and its eventual unraveling around 1450 BCE. Let's dive into the potential environmental impacts of those ancient fishing practices, shall we? The Minoans, with their fleets of wooden boats and handcrafted nets, might seem quaint compared to today's industrial fishing behemoths. But even back then, the pressure on local marine life was real. The Mediterranean isn't exactly teeming with endless fish stocks, and the Minoans, with their keen aptitude for trade and consumption, were well aware of the limits of their watery resources. They understood that overfishing could turn a bustling port into a ghost town faster than you can say, see base shortage. Archaeologists have found evidence of fishing regulations etched in Linear B tablets, suggesting the ancients were already grappling with the delicate balance of supply and demand. It's a far cry from today's complex fisheries management systems, but shows a surprisingly modern awareness of ecological limits. Fast forward a few millennia, and the parallels with contemporary issues are as clear as the Aegean waters on a sunny day. Just like the Minoans, modern societies face the challenge of balancing economic growth with environmental sustainability. Overfishing, habitat destruction, and climate change are the contemporary sirens luring us toward potential catastrophe. The Minoans might not have had to contend with melting ice caps, but they did face natural disasters, such as earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, that rocked their world, literally and metaphorically. The eruption of Thera, for instance, around 1600 BCE, likely triggered tsunamis that devastated coastal communities and disrupted trade. It's a sobering reminder that while we might think we're steering the ship, nature always has the final say. As the Minoan civilization began its fateful decline around 1450 BCE, the intricate web of trade and commerce that had once held the island together began to unravel. Scholars debate the exact causes, but a perfect storm of environmental catastrophe, economic instability, and external pressures seems to have played a role. The once bustling palatial centers, with their vibrant frescoes and bustling marketplaces, fell silent, leaving only echoes of a once great society. The Minoans, those masters of the sea, were eventually overshadowed by the Mycenaeans, who sailed in from the Greek mainland to fill the power vacuum. Yet, the legacy of the Minoans endures, like the enduring scent of the sea air that clings to your clothes after a day on the water. Their innovations in trade, art, and architecture laid the groundwork for future civilizations. Take the storied labyrinth of Knossos, for example. While the myth of the Minotaur might be more fiction than fact, the palace's complex layout inspired legends that continue to captivate the imagination. The Minoans' maritime prowess influenced the seafaring traditions of subsequent Greek cultures, and their artistic styles can be traced through the ages, echoing in the pottery and frescoes of later civilizations. In modern Crete, traces of this ancient world are as ubiquitous as olive trees. The island's rich archaeological sites, from the ruins of Knossos to the storied city of Phaistos, draw visitors from around the globe, eager to walk in the footsteps of those ancient mariners. And while the Minoans might not have left behind epic poetry like Homer, their story is etched in the very fabric of the island, a testament to a time when the sea was both a lifeline and a formidable adversary. So, as you close the chapter on this day in ancient Crete, let's wrap it up with a hearty dose of modern reflection. Picture yourself as the ancient mariner once more, standing at the edge of the sea, the horizon stretching out before you like a promise. You've navigated the choppy waters of history, from the bustling markets to the high-stakes game of trade and survival. You've seen the romance and the reality, the myth and the grit. As you drift off to sleep, dreaming of distant shores and ancient seas, take a moment to appreciate the human spirit's resilience and adaptability. Whether in the Bronze Age or the digital age, we're all just trying to make our way through the complex currents of life. The Minoans, with their daring voyages and artistic flair, remind us that even in the face of uncertainty, there's beauty and innovation to be found. And who knows, maybe tomorrow, as you navigate the waves of modern life, you'll find a little bit of that Minoan magic guiding your way. Here's to dreaming with eyes open, navigating the tides of history with curiosity and wonder. Sleep well, intrepid explorer, and remember that the past is never truly gone. It's just waiting for someone like you to bring it to life once more. Your day begins with the kind of jolt that only comes from being hauled out of your straw-filled bed before the sun has even considered peeking over the horizon. Welcome to life in an ancient Egyptian quarry where the early bird doesn't get the worm. It gets a hefty slab of limestone with a side of back-breaking labor. There's no snooze button here, just the relentless clamor of a taskmaster's voice ensuring you're up, and at M to add your muscle to a project that rivals any modern construction site. Before you can even rub the sleep from your eyes, you're on the move, shuffling along with a throng of fellow workers. The destination, a quarry that might as well be halfway to the underworld in terms of the distance you need to cover. We're talking kilometers here, not a leisurely stroll in the park. Some quarries, like the famed ones at Tura or Aswan, were situated so far from the construction sites that you'd have better luck hitching a ride on a Nile crocodile than making it on foot. But alas, ancient Egyptians were not known for their creature comforts or Uber services. Forget any romantic notions of pyramid building as a noble pursuit. The truth is, this was an economic juggernaut driven by a pharaoh's penchant for massive, flashy monuments to his own eternal glory. We're talking serious cash flow, resources that would make even the most indulgent of modern governments blush. The logistics alone were mind-boggling. Thousands of laborers, each one a cog in a colossal machine, fueled not by passion, but by necessity, and a daily ration of bread and beer. Yes, beer. It's not just the breakfast of champions, but the breakfast of ancient pyramid builders too. Now, let's address the big, shiny myth that pyramid building was some kind of grand, glorious endeavor. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Sure, the pyramids are a marvel, but the process was more sweat and blisters than divine inspiration. These projects were economic leviathans, consuming resources on a scale that could rival a small war. Laborers numbered in the tens of thousands, each one costing the state an arm and a leg, or more accurately, a loaf and a pint. The scale of these operations is staggering. Estimates suggest tens of thousands of workers were needed, and they didn't come cheap. Feeding this workforce was a logistical nightmare of its own. Grain, vegetables, and yes, that beloved beer, all had to be produced, transported, and distributed with military precision. Forget about a leisurely breakfast buffet. This was more like an assembly line of sustenance designed to keep the human engine running at full throttle. But why all this fuss? Why the obsession with building tombs that doubled as skyscrapers of stone? Well, in a world where the afterlife was just another stage of existence, ensuring a pharaoh's smooth transition was top priority. Economic factors came into play too. Building these massive structures was a way to keep the economy humming, employing thousands and showcasing the state's might and wealth to anyone who dared question it. It's the ancient equivalent of a nation flexing its economic muscles with a bit more stone and a lot more sweat. So there you are, trudging along with the rest of the workers, a cog in this economic and social machine. You might not be aware of the grand schemes at play or the political machinations driving this monumental endeavor. All you know is that the sun is rising, the quarry awaits, and the day is just beginning. It's time to put your back into it, because those stones aren't going to carve themselves. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, it's time to get down to brass tacks, or in your case, copper chisels. Welcome to the mid-morning grind of an ancient Egyptian quarry worker. Forget the glamour of chiseling away at a masterpiece. You're armed with a tool that bends more than a politician's promise, the copper chisel. That's right, these bad boys are made from a metal softer than a marshmallow left in the sun, requiring constant sharpening just to get through the day. But hey, at least you're not alone in this metal versus stone showdown. Teaming up with the chisels are the dolerite pounding stones, nature's own sledgehammers. These hefty rocks are the real muscle on the job site, capable of smashing through limestone like a toddler through a sandcastle. Now, let's talk technique, because you didn't think you could just swing wildly and hope for the best, did you? No, there's a method to this madness. Workers used a technique called levering and wedging, a fancy way of saying you pray to the gods that the rock cracks nicely along your chisel line. First, you chip away at the stone to create a groove. Think of it as drawing a dotted line for Mother Nature to follow. Once you've marked your territory, you insert wooden wedges into the groove, soaking them with water. As the wood swells, it exerts pressure on the stone, and if the gods are smiling on you today, the stone splits neatly along the line. Voila! You've got yourself a brand new slab ready for transport. It's like a magic trick, except it takes hours and leaves you covered in sweat and dust. Speaking of dust, let's not sugarcoat the working conditions. This isn't a day at the spa. It's more like a day in a sauna where someone's decided to add a dust storm for good measure. The air is thick with limestone particles, which, as you might imagine, aren't great for the lungs. No masks or respirators here, just good old-fashioned lung power, which means respiratory issues were as common as a pharaoh's ego. And let's not forget the heat. With the sun beating down on the open quarry, temperatures could easily soar past 40 degrees Celsius. That's over 100 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you keeping score at home. Hydration was crucial, and that's where your daily beer ration came in. Yes, beer. This wasn't some weekend indulgence. It was a vital source of hydration and calories, a liquid lunch that kept the workforce going. But even the hardest workers need a break, and the Egyptians had their own version of the coffee break. Around mid-morning, when the sun's unrelenting glare made it feel as if Ra himself was personally scrutinizing your work, it was time to down tools and take a breather. Workers would gather in the shade of whatever structure or rock offered respite, enjoying a moment of camaraderie, and of course, that all-important beer. It was a brief pause in the relentless pace, a chance to catch your breath, and maybe even share a joke or two with your fellow laborers. Because let's face it, when you're spending your day pounding rocks, a little humor goes a long way. All this effort wasn't for the faint-hearted, and the risks were real. Injuries were common, ranging from smashed fingers and broken bones to more serious accidents. Without modern medicine, even a minor wound could turn into a major problem. Infection was a constant threat, and with no antiseptics or antibiotics, a simple cut could lead to dire consequences. You can bet the workers were as careful as they could be. But in a job where heavy stones and sharp tools were your daily companions, accidents were inevitable. Despite these challenges, there was a certain pride in the work. Sure, the conditions were tough, but being part of something monumental, literally, had its own appeal. You were contributing to a legacy that would outlast your own life many times over, a testament to the power and glory of the pharaoh. And who knows, maybe future generations would look at these massive structures and wonder at the skill and dedication of the people who built them. Of course, they'd probably also wonder why anyone would willingly toil in such conditions, but that's a question for another time. As the morning wears on and the sun climbs to its zenith, the work continues. Each swing of the chisel, each thud of the dolerite stone brings you one step closer to meeting your daily quota. It's a relentless cycle, but one that has its own rhythm, its own sense of purpose. Because in the end, you're not just moving stones, you're moving history. And while you might not realize it now, future generations will look back on your work with awe and wonder. So take a swig of your beer, wipe the sweat from your brow, and get back to it. The afternoon is just around the corner, and those stones aren't going to move themselves. As the afternoon sun hovers in the sky like an overbearing supervisor, let's dive into the social universe of the quarry. Here, the hierarchy is as solid as the limestone blocks you're carving, and just as unforgiving. Forget any notions of a democratic workplace. This is ancient Egypt, where the chain of command is as rigid as the pyramids themselves. At the top of this rocky food chain, you've got the overseer, the big cheese, the guy who calls the shots. He's the one making sure everyone else is sweating just the right amount. Think of him as the ancient equivalent of a middle manager, but with a lot more clout and a penchant for ensuring the pharaoh's wishes are as fulfilled as his own ego. The overseer's role is crucial. He's the eyes and ears of the higher-ups, ensuring that productivity doesn't falter. With a knack for keeping the workers in line and the production on schedule, his position is both respected and resented. Talk about a balancing act. Beneath him are the foremen, the lieutenants of the quarry, who keep the gears of this stone-churning machine well-oiled. They oversee different teams, each responsible for specific tasks, quarrying, transporting, or carving. These guys are the bridge between the overseer and the laborers, translating commands into action, and occasionally action into reprimands. It's a tough gig, but someone's got to do it. Then there's you and the rest of the laborers, the backbone of this operation, or more accurately, the backs breaking under the weight of it all. You're the ones doing the heavy lifting, literally and figuratively. The pay? Well, let's just say you won't be buying any beachfront property on the Nile anytime soon. Your compensation comes in the form of rations, bread, onions, and that all-important beer. It's not the most lucrative career, but it's a living, and in a society where the pharaoh's word is law, it's best to keep those chisels moving. Speaking of the pharaoh, his influence looms as large as the monuments he's commissioning. There's a reason you're sweating it out under the sun, and it's largely because he decided to immortalize himself in stone. His decrees dictate everything from work schedules to the minutiae of daily operations. The pharaoh might as well be the original micromanager. Keeping tabs on everything is sort of his thing. Religion, too, weaves its way into Quarry life. Every swing of the chisel, every crack of the stone, is done with a sense of divine duty. The gods are watching, after all, and in a culture where the afterlife is as important as the life you're currently slogging through, keeping them appeased is no small matter. It's believed that the pharaoh is a living god, a conduit between the divine and the mortal. So when he says jump, you don't just ask how high. You leap like your eternal soul depends on it. But let's not forget the quirks of the workplace itself, where ancient office politics play out in ways that would make even the most seasoned corporate veteran cringe. There are rivalries and alliances, as in any workplace. Maybe one foreman has a secret vendetta against another, or perhaps your fellow laborer is angling for a slightly cushier spot in the shade. It might sound petty, but when your daily environment involves back-breaking labor under a relentless sun, these little victories matter. Yet, there's something inherently absurd about it all. You're part of a machine that builds monuments meant to stand the test of time, yet your own life is as transient as the morning mist. It's a cosmic joke, but you're not laughing. Instead, you channel that absurdity into your work, knowing that one day, future generations will stand in awe of these massive stone structures, blissfully unaware of the human sweat and toil that went into each block. In the grand scheme of things, your role might seem insignificant, but it's not. You're part of a legacy, one that combines religious devotion, economic necessity, and the unyielding will of a pharaoh into something tangible. It's a testament to human endurance and ambition, even if the path to get there is paved with blisters and sunburns. As the afternoon wears on, the hierarchy of the quarry continues to hum along, a well-oiled machine with each cog playing its part. The overseer keeps a watchful eye, ensuring that productivity doesn't falter. The foremen bark orders and manage their teams, and you, the laborers, keep chiseling away at history, one stone at a time. Sure, the politics might be as thick as the dust in the air, and the sun might be as unyielding as the overseer's gaze, but there's a rhythm to it all. A rhythm that echoes through the ages, long after the sun has set and the last block has been placed. It's a rhythm that speaks of human endeavor, of ambition and toil, of the ceaseless march of history that you're unwittingly a part of. The day isn't over yet, and neither is your place in this grand scheme. So take a deep breath, wipe the sweat from your brow, and keep chiseling away. Because in the end, it's not just about moving stones, it's about moving history. And that, my friend, is a task worthy of the gods themselves. As the sun lazily begins its descent, you're not calling it a day just yet. Oh no, the real challenge of this Stone Age symphony is just kicking off. It's time to tackle logistics, and in ancient Egypt, that means figuring out how to move a chunk of rock heavier than a dozen hippos across distances that make a marathon look like a sprint. Welcome to the world of ancient Egyptian transportation, where innovation meets sheer brute force, and everything hangs in the balance of a well-lubricated sled. Now, if you think moving house is stressful, try moving a 2-ton limestone block. The Egyptians, being the crafty problem solvers they were, had a few tricks up their sleeves, or tunics, I suppose. Enter the sledge. This genius invention was essentially a wooden contraption that looked like a cross between a sled and a pallet. Picture this, a team of workers hauling these behemoths across the sandy terrain, using ropes and sheer willpower. But wait, there's more. To ease the journey, they'd pour water over the sand in front of the sled, reducing friction. It's like ancient hydroplaning, except you're the engine. This wasn't just a spur of the moment, let's see what happens kind of plan. No, this method was meticulously calculated. Researchers today estimate that by wetting the sand, the workers could have the amount of force needed to move the stones. So, imagine a workforce of about 20 men pulling one of these sledges. Less than you might think, right? That's because the Egyptians understood the physics of the situation long before Newton came along to write it down. But logistical genius didn't stop there. The Nile River, Egypt's liquid highway, played a crucial role in this stone-shifting saga. Once the blocks were hauled to the riverbank, they'd be loaded onto boats and floated downstream. This wasn't just any old barge. These vessels were often custom-built for the task, with planks sewn together with rope, flexible enough to absorb the river's moods, yet strong enough to carry the weight of history in the making. These boats could carry up to 70 tons of stone, making them the heavy lifters of their day. And here's where the economic gears start turning. The workforce required wasn't just a mob of muscled laborers. It was a well-oiled machine of specialists. You've got the stonecutters, the haulers, the boat builders, and the sailors. Each had their role, their place in the grand scheme of things. It's estimated that during peak construction periods, like those at Giza, you could be looking at a workforce of around 30,000. And that's not even counting the support staff, cooks, brewers, and bakers, who made sure nobody fainted from hunger or thirst. The economic impact of these operations was monumental. Think about it. To keep this machine running, you needed food, shelter, and of course, beer. Lots of beer. We're talking about an ancient supply chain that rivals our modern ones in complexity. Grain had to be grown, harvested, and processed into bread and beer. Livestock was raised to provide meat, leather, and bone tools. All of this while ensuring that the rest of Egypt didn't starve because the pharaoh wanted a new pyramid. And let's not forget the political implications. These massive projects were not just about building tombs. They were about building power. The pharaohs used these monumental structures to flex their divine muscles, reminding everyone from Nubia to the Mediterranean who was in charge. Every stone lifted wasn't just a testament to engineering prowess, but a block in the foundation of the pharaoh's legacy. Of course, the romantic myth of armies of slaves dragging stones across the desert under the whip of a tyrant is just that, a myth. Recent evidence suggests that most workers were skilled laborers, well-fed and housed, and their work was considered an honor. Sure, the conditions were harsh, and injuries were common, but these were not the shackled slaves of Hollywood's imagination. They were part of a national enterprise that, for better or worse, was the pride of Egypt. Transporting these blocks was not a task for the faint-hearted, and every journey was an engineering challenge of its own. The stakes were high, and the margin for error was slim. Lose a block in the river or the desert, and you're not just set back weeks in construction. You're facing the wrath of a pharaoh who isn't known for his forgiving nature. As the shadows grow long, you can see the teams setting up for the next phase. Tomorrow, they'll continue this epic saga of stone moving, each day a step closer to the final goal. For now, though, it's time to rest, recharge, and maybe swap a few tales with your fellow laborers over a well-deserved beer. Because even in the midst of monumental tasks, it's the human connections that keep the wheels, or rather, the sledges, turning. In this world of stone and sweat, you're a part of something larger than life, a cog in a machine that's as much about legacy as it is about labor. And as the sun sets on another day in the quarry, you can't help but marvel at the ingenuity of it all. You're not just moving stones, you're moving history. And so, as the last golden rays of the sun bid farewell to another gritty day in the quarry, let's take a moment to reflect on what it all means. Here you are, a humble stone mover, standing on the cusp of history, part of an epic tale that's been unfolding for millennia. The pyramids and temples you helped create aren't just piles of rock. They're the Instagram-worthy posts of the ancient world, eternal monuments to human ambition and the pharaoh's relentless quest for immortality. But what's the real legacy of these stone leviathans, and what have they left etched on the landscape and on the lives of those who built them? First off, let's clear up a classic misconception. The notion that these grand structures sprang up from the desert like divine mushrooms after a rainstorm. The reality was far grittier. These quarries, like those at Aswan and Tura, weren't just holes in the ground. They were sprawling industrial sites, buzzing with activity and ingenuity. Over time, the relentless extraction of stone transformed the landscape in a way that would make even modern environmentalists shudder. Picture vast swaths of land, gouged and scarred, ecosystems disrupted, and local resources stretched to their limits. It's the kind of environmental impact report that would make today's regulatory bodies break out in hives. But it wasn't just the land that bore the brunt of this monumental enterprise. The local populations, too, felt the weight of the pharaoh's ambitions. While working on these projects could mean steady rations and a sense of purpose, it was also a life of backbreaking labor under the relentless Egyptian sun. And for many, it meant being uprooted from their homes and thrust into a world where work was dictated by the rise and fall of the Nile and the whims of divine rulers. Sure, some workers were skilled artisans, but the majority were conscripted laborers who might have preferred a quiet life tending fields to a life chiseling stone. This wasn't just a job. It was a conscription into the annals of history, whether they liked it or not. Yet, amid the sweat and toil, there was something undeniably magnetic about these structures. The ancient Egyptians were masters of propaganda, after all, and the pyramids were their ultimate marketing campaign. In a society where the line between the mortal and the divine was as blurred as the horizon in a sandstorm, every block placed was a testament to the pharaoh's divine right to rule. And let's face it, there's something intoxicating about the idea of creating something that might touch eternity, even if your own lifespan is as fleeting as a desert breeze. But let's not get too misty-eyed. The truth is, these projects came at a tremendous human cost. Workers faced harsh conditions, long hours, and the constant threat of injury or disease. Forget the romantic notion of building for glory. This was about survival, pure and simple. Archaeological evidence, like the workers' village at Giza, shows that while they were tended to with medical care and sustenance, life was still a precarious balancing act. And while some might have taken pride in their contributions, others probably cursed their luck for being born in an era when the measure of a man was how many stones he could shift in a day. As centuries rolled on and the pharaoh's glory days dimmed, these quarries and the people who worked them became footnotes in the grand narrative of history. The stones they extracted stand silent, now part of the landscape they once altered so drastically. Yet, the impact of these ancient endeavors is profound. They laid the foundation for Egypt's reputation as a cradle of civilization, a land of wonders that would captivate explorers, scholars, and tourists for generations to come. The pyramids and temples remain, reminding us that while human lives are fleeting, the marks we leave on history can endure. Of course, the romanticized image of the pyramid builder as an eternal craftsman working in harmony with the gods is just that, a romantic notion. The reality was often one of exploitation and hardship, a testament to the lengths humans will go to create something larger than themselves. Yet, within this harsh reality lies a kernel of truth. The pyramids are indeed awe-inspiring, not just for their scale, but for what they represent. A moment in time when the collective will of a nation was focused on a single, monumental purpose. So, as you stand there watching the sun dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the quarry, take a moment to ponder the duality of it all. These structures are both the product of human perseverance and the sacrifice of countless lives. They're a reminder of both the heights of human achievement and the depths of human cost. And perhaps that's what makes them so compelling, so enduring in our collective consciousness. They are, quite literally, history written in stone, a testament to the power of human endeavor and the price paid for immortality. In the end, the legacy of these quarries is as multifaceted as the stones they produced. They shaped the landscape, forged a nation's identity, and left an indelible mark on history. And while the lives of those who toiled here are often lost to the sands of time, their collective efforts continue to resonate, echoing through the ages as a reminder of what it means to be human, driven by ambition, bound by duty, and forever reaching for the stars. If you think your life is tough, try waking up on the endless steppes of Mongolia. Miles of nothing but grass under an enormous sky where the wind chills you to the bone. Welcome to the daily grind of an ancient Mongol nomad. Forget the modern comforts. There's no morning espresso or a news feed to scroll through. Instead, your day kicks off with the aroma of a fermented treat, mare's milk, or as the locals call it, erag. It's the kind of drink that puts hair on your chest, whether you want it or not. Living in a yurt is like carrying your home on your back, which is both incredibly practical and surprisingly cozy. The yurt, or jur, is your fortress against the harsh elements. It's a round tent that can be packed up and reassembled faster than you can say, Genghis Khan. And it's not just about portability. These things are designed to withstand the brutal Mongolian winds and keep a family warm in temperatures that drop well below freezing. We're talking about a life where resourcefulness isn't just a handy skill, it's your lifeline. Now, let's address the elephant, or should I say the warhorse, in the room. The Mongols have this larger-than-life image of being invincible warriors, storming through history like a hurricane. But here's a curveball. They weren't just about brute force. In fact, they were more like the chess grandmasters of their time, moving pieces with cunning and strategy. Sure, they could swing a sword like nobody's business, but their real power came from being the ultimate strategists. Take the way they handled logistics. moving across the steppes with an army, not as simple as packing a lunch and hitting the trail. They had a system, efficient and precise. An army could travel up to 100 miles a day, thanks to their hardy horses and an uncanny ability to live off the land. Compare that to the European armies, which thought they were hot stuff if they managed 20 miles on a good day. And let's not forget their diet. While the rest of the world was getting fancy with spices and sauces, the Mongols were keeping it real with dried meat and milk. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept them strong and ready to roll at a moment's notice. They didn't need Michelin stars. They needed calories and speed. Let's debunk another myth, the so-called Mongol invincibility. Yes, they were a force to be reckoned with, but they weren't superheroes. They had their losses, their bad days. But they learned, adapted, and came back stronger. It was their adaptability that often gave them the upper hand. They integrated new ideas, technologies, and even people into their ranks. Imagine that, a culture that was as open to change as they were to conquering new lands. And while we're busting myths, let's talk about the romantic notion of the fearsome, bloodthirsty warrior. Sure, they could terrify their enemies, but they were also skilled negotiators. They didn't always have to win battles to win wars. Sometimes, the threat of an impending Mongol horde was enough to bring cities to their knees without a single arrow fired. The Mongols' understanding of the terrain was their secret weapon. They knew how to leverage the vastness of the steppes to their advantage, turning what seemed like a barren wasteland into a strategic playground. They didn't just survive in this harsh environment. They thrived, using every resource at their disposal to maintain an empire that stretched from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe. In the end, the daily life of a Mongol wasn't just about survival. It was about mastering the art of living in harmony with one of the most unforgiving landscapes on Earth. It was about crafting a lifestyle that was equal parts tradition and innovation, where every decision was a calculated move in the game of life and conquest. So next time you're complaining about the Wi-Fi being down, remember that somewhere on the windswept plains of the past, a Mongol warrior was sipping his fermented mare's milk, plotting his next move, and wondering why anyone would ever need anything more. So, after you've sipped your erag and pondered the logistics of a Mongol invasion, let's shift gears to a world where reality and the supernatural were as intertwined as a yurt's felt walls. Welcome to the spiritual side of the Mongol Empire, where shamans didn't just hold sway. They ran the spiritual show with all the flair of a rock star on a world tour. Imagine this. You're in the middle of the vast Mongolian steppes, and the wind is howling like a banshee. The landscape is as empty as a politician's promise, and yet it's here that the Mongols found their spiritual compass. Enter the shaman, a figure who was part spiritual guide, part community therapist, and part meteorologist. Because in a land where the weather could mean life or death, you better believe your local shaman had the inside scoop on the next storm. These spiritual maestros had a bag of tricks that would make any modern-day illusionist green with envy. One of their most intriguing rituals involved talking to spirits through bones, a practice known as scapulomancy. So, how does one have a bone-to-spirit chat? The shaman would take the shoulder blade of a sheep, heat it up, and then read the cracks that formed. It was like an ancient version of reading tea leaves, but with a much higher calcium content. And hey, when Google Maps hasn't been invented yet, you take your directions wherever you can get them. But what did these bone readings mean for the Mongols? Well, they weren't just party tricks. They were crucial for making decisions that could mean the difference between a successful raid and a disastrous defeat. When you're planning to conquer half the known world, you need all the advice you can get, even if it comes from the skeletal remains of last week's dinner. Shamans didn't only play with bones. They were the gatekeepers of the spirit world, believed to travel between realms to communicate with the ancestors. In a society where lineage was everything, keeping the ancestors happy was a full-time job. These spiritual consultants were more in demand than a Black Friday sale, advising on everything from personal health to military campaigns. Let's not forget the economic angle. The Mongols, ever the pragmatists, weren't above incentivizing their spiritual guides. A shaman who delivered favorable omens could find themselves handsomely rewarded, which made being a shaman not just a calling, but also a pretty sweet gig, provided you didn't mind the less-than-stable job security. After all, delivering bad news to a Mongol chieftain was a risky business, akin to critiquing a chef's signature dish, while he's holding a cleaver. Now, here's where it gets fascinating. This blend of spirituality and pragmatism wasn't just a quaint cultural quirk. It was a driving force behind Mongol political and military strategies. Take Genghis Khan, for example. He wasn't just a genius on the battlefield. He was also a master of psychological warfare. By leveraging shamanic rituals and beliefs, he could convince his followers and enemies that the heavens were on his side. It's one thing to face a fearsome army. It's another to face an army that believes it has divine backing. This spiritual conviction had a domino effect on Mongol society, influencing everything from laws to leadership. Picture a legal system where the ultimate authority isn't just the Khan, but also the spirits of ancestors past. It was like having a celestial supreme court that you really didn't want to cross. This belief system kept the social order intact, because who's going to argue with a law supposedly handed down by great-granddad from beyond the grave? But before you romanticize this as some ancient version of a fantasy novel, let's be clear. The spiritual world of the Mongols was as harsh and unforgiving as the steppes themselves. Being out of favor with the spirits, or the shamans who spoke for them, could be a fast track to social exile or worse. In a cutthroat society where survival meant everything, spiritual favor was just another resource to be managed and maximized. The Mongols' spiritual practices weren't just mystical mumbo-jumbo. They were deeply entwined with their worldview and actions. Think of it as an ancient form of risk management, where the stakes were life, death, and the destiny of an empire. It's a reminder that even in the harshest of environments, human beings have always sought meaning beyond the tangible, looking to the heavens, or in this case, a particularly well-roasted sheep bone, for guidance. In the grand scheme of things, the Mongol spiritual world was a complex tapestry of belief and pragmatism, where shamans wielded power not just because they claimed to speak to the spirits, but because they played an integral role in the social and political fabric of the time. They were the original influencers, shaping opinions and decisions long before the days of TikTok and Twitter. And so, as the sun sets over the steppes and the wind whispers through the grass, you can almost hear the echoes of those ancient rituals. They are a testament to a time when the supernatural was as real as the next raid, and the spirits were as much a part of life as the horses that carried the Mongols across continents. These beliefs, as quirky as they might seem to us now, were the backbone of an empire that changed the course of history. So next time you consult your horoscope or toss a coin for luck, remember that somewhere in the annals of history, a Mongol shaman is nodding in approval. As you cozy up with your historical musings, let's pivot from the mystical steppes to the bustling crossroads of commerce, where the Mongol Empire's real-life monopoly game unfolded. If you've ever wondered how a bunch of nomads managed to bankroll an empire that spanned 9 million square miles, you're in for a treat. Spoiler alert, it wasn't all about plundering and pillaging, though that was certainly part of the fun. Picture the Silk Road, a network of trade routes more tangled than your earbuds after a morning jog. This wasn't just a route. It was the economic superhighway of the medieval world, stretching over 4,000 miles from China to the Mediterranean. And who do you think held the keys to this treasure trove? Our friends the Mongols, of course. Under their rule, the Silk Road wasn't just a path. It was a gold mine, and they were the toll collectors. Now, before you get all misty-eyed about romantic caravans and exotic spices, let's get real. The Silk Road was less about silk scarves fluttering in the breeze and more about hard-nosed business. The Mongols understood that controlling these routes meant controlling the flow of wealth. They weren't just warriors. They were the original venture capitalists, investing in infrastructure like roads and bridges to keep the cash flowing faster than a Black Friday sale. Here's a juicy tidbit. Genghis Khan and his successors didn't just kick back and watch the profits roll in. They implemented a postal system known as the Yam, which was basically the medieval version of FedEx. It featured way stations with fresh horses and supplies every 20 to 30 miles, ensuring that messages and goods moved swiftly across their vast empire. It's like they had the world's first Amazon Prime, but with fewer drones and more guys on horseback. And speaking of wealth, let's talk tribute systems. Once the Mongols had their boot firmly planted on a city's neck, they didn't burn it to the ground, at least not always. Instead, they offered a deal you couldn't refuse: pay tribute or face the wrath of the horde. It was a win-win for the Mongols. Cities got to keep their lives and their buildings, while the Mongols added a steady stream of gold, silver, and luxury goods to their coffers. Think of it as the ultimate protection racket, minus the wise guys in pinstripe suits. In the 13th century, the city of Kiev learned this the hard way. After resisting Mongol demands for tribute, they found themselves on the receiving end of a very unpleasant visit. The city was sacked, and its population decimated. Lesson learned. When the Mongols came knocking, it was time to pony up. This tribute system was more than just a way to get rich. It was a strategic move to keep conquered people in line without the constant need for military enforcement. And it worked like a charm. Now, let's not sugarcoat it. The Mongols knew how to throw down when necessary, but they were also savvy enough to know when to take their foot off the gas. They were all about maximizing efficiency, whether that meant taking over a city through force or simply adding it to their growing list of paying customers. This economic pragmatism was the secret sauce behind their fearsome reputation. They weren't just the destroyers of worlds, they were also the accountants of empires. Of course, not every city was a willing participant in this grand economic experiment. Some tried to resist, only to find themselves on the receiving end of the Mongol version of a hostile takeover. But for those who played ball, life under Mongol rule could be surprisingly stable. Trade flourished, and merchants found themselves traveling safely across regions that had once been plagued by banditry and war. It was a period known as the Pax Mongolica, where peace, and by peace, I mean an absence of war, not the absence of tension, allowed commerce to thrive. Let's not forget the Mongols' penchant for adopting the best bits of other cultures. They were like cultural magpies, picking up shiny new ideas wherever they went. From the Chinese, they borrowed gunpowder and printing, while Persian administrators helped them manage their sprawling empire. The Mongols were masters of synthesis, blending different elements to create something greater than the sum of its parts. It's like they had the world's most ambitious R&D department, constantly innovating and improving. And what about the myth of the Mongols as uncultured brutes? Well, that's as misleading as a politician's campaign promise. Sure, they were formidable in battle, but they were also patrons of the arts. Under their rule, cities like Samarkand and Baghdad became centers of learning and culture. Libraries flourished, and artists and scientists were encouraged to thrive. The Mongol courts were places where ideas mingled as freely as the spices on a trader's caravan. So next time you hear the phrase Mongol horde, picture not just the thunder of hooves and the clash of swords, but also the chink of coins and the rustle of silk. The Mongols were as much about diplomacy and economics as they were about war. They were entrepreneurs and empire builders, using both the carrot and the stick to shape the world in their image. In the end, the Mongol Empire was a testament to the power of adaptability and innovation. They didn't just conquer lands, they transformed them. Their legacy is one of cultural exchange and economic integration, a reminder that even the most fearsome warriors understood the value of a well-balanced portfolio. As we prepare to delve deeper into the Mongol story, let's keep in mind that their empire was as complex and multifaceted as the people who built it. An empire that was as much about brains as it was about brawn. So buckle up, because the ride's not over yet. So, as we leave behind the economic juggernaut that was the Mongol Empire, let's dive into the political shark tank that was their ruling class. Imagine a world where council meetings resemble the bloody intrigue of Game of Thrones, more than a polite exchange of diplomatic pleasantries. Welcome to the Mongol Kurultai, a council gathering where alliances were forged, betrayals plotted, and power plays executed with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. If you thought your office politics were cutthroat, wait until you hear what went on behind the yurt flaps. The Kurultai wasn't just a powwow for exchanging pleasantries over a cup of arag. No, this was where the real politicking happened, where the fate of the empire could hinge on a single decision or a slyly raised eyebrow. The stakes were as high as the steps were wide, and the players brought their A-game. Picture a gathering of the empire's elite, each one nursing ambitions bigger than a Mongol pony, ready to employ any means necessary to climb the greasy pole of power. Now, let's talk about the man at the center of it all, Genghis Khan. Born Temujin in 1162, he rose from humble beginnings to become the ultimate power broker. His ability to inspire loyalty and fear was the stuff of legends. And while his battlefield prowess was unmatched, his real genius lay in his political maneuvering. Think of him as a medieval puppet master, pulling strings with such finesse that even Machiavelli would have taken notes. Genghis Khan's leadership style was a curious blend of meritocracy and ruthlessness. Sure, he was all about promoting based on ability rather than birthright, a radical concept in a feudal world. But he also had a knack for keeping his subordinates on their toes. Cross him, and you'd find yourself on the business end of a Mongol saber faster than you could say Chinggis. Loyalty was rewarded handsomely, but betrayal was met with swift and brutal justice. In the Mongol Empire, you didn't just play the game, you played for keeps. Take the case of Jamaka, a childhood friend turned rival. Their relationship was the kind of on-again, off-again saga that makes soap operas look tame. Jamaka initially supported Temujin's rise, but later broke ranks, sparking a decades-long rivalry. When Jamaka was finally captured, Genghis offered him a high position if he pledged allegiance. Jamaka refused, opting instead for an honorable death. Talk about commitment to a grudge. But it wasn't just about personal rivalries. The Kurultai was the stage for some serious empire building. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, his empire was divided among his sons, each a Khan in their own right. Cue the power struggles. The succession wasn't a smooth handover of a family business. It was a battle royale of epic proportions. Each son had his own ambitions, and unity was more of a suggestion than a rule. The most notable of these successors was Ojdeh Khan, Genghis's third son. He was chosen as the great Khan and continued his father's work with gusto, expanding the Mongol Empire to its zenith. Ojdeh was a shrewd leader, known for his administrative reforms and infrastructure projects. But he also had a penchant for the bottle, which eventually led to his untimely demise in 1241. His death sparked a power vacuum that was as chaotic as a Black Friday sale, minus the discounts. This brings us to the figure of Kublai Khan, Genghis's grandson, who ruled from 1260 to 1294. Kublai was the Marco Polo of the Mongol Empire, bridging east and west with his eclectic mix of policies. Under his reign, the empire became more cosmopolitan, embracing the cultures it had conquered. But Kublai's ambitions weren't without challenges. His attempts to conquer Japan were famously thwarted by typhoons, dubbed kamikaze or divine winds, that decimated his fleets. Even the most powerful Khan wasn't immune to the whims of nature, a humbling reminder that not all battles are won with brute force. The politics of the Mongol Empire were as dynamic as they were brutal. Alliances shifted like desert sands, and today's ally could be tomorrow's adversary. The Kurultai was a masterclass in realpolitik, where leaders had to balance diplomacy with a readiness to draw the sword. It was a world where survival depended not just on military might, but on the ability to read the room and the winds of political change. Consider the case of Berk Khan, a grandson of Genghis Khan who ruled the Golden Horde. A convert to Islam, Berk clashed with his cousin Hulagu Khan over the treatment of Muslim lands during the Mongol invasions. This family feud eventually led to the Berk-Hulagu War, marking one of the first major cracks in the Mongol unity. It was a classic tale of ideological differences meeting familial discord, a recipe for political fireworks. But let's not pretend this was all cloak and dagger drama. The Mongols were also savvy enough to employ diplomacy when it suited them. They established diplomatic relations with European powers and even exchanged envoys with the papacy. These were the original cross-continental networking events, complete with all the awkward introductions and smiling through gritted teeth pleasantries you'd expect from any high-stakes political gathering. Yet, despite the internecine squabbles and backroom deals, the Mongol Empire remained remarkably resilient. It was a testament to their ability to adapt, to embrace change even as they clung to tradition. The Kurultai may have been a den of vipers, but it was also the crucible in which the Mongol leadership was forged, hardened by the fires of ambition and tempered by the realities of ruling a sprawling empire. So, as we wrap up this foray into the political theater of the Mongols, keep in mind that their story is far from over. We've only scratched the surface of the intrigue and machinations that fueled their rise and eventual fragmentation. The Mongol Empire was a living, breathing entity, shaped by the ambitions and missteps of those who dared to lead it. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the legacy they left behind, exploring how their influence continues to reverberate through history like the thunder of 1,000 hooves across the steppes. And now, dear history adventurers, as we venture into the grand finale of the Mongol saga, we're diving straight into their legacy like a daring dive off a cliff, no parachute required. The Mongol Empire, once a sprawling behemoth with an appetite for expansion bigger than Genghis Khan's ambitions, eventually faced the realities of running an empire that spanned continents and cultures. It's a tale of both glory and decline, peppered with truths that Hollywood conveniently forgets in favor of more marketable myths. Let's start with the undeniable fact. The Mongols were the empire builders extraordinaire. By the 13th century, they had carved out the largest contiguous land empire in history, stretching over 9 million square miles. That's roughly the size of Africa, mind you. But holding onto such a vast empire was like trying to keep a melting ice cream cone intact under the scorching sun. The cracks began to show, and eventually, the mighty Mongol Empire fractured into smaller khanates, each with its own story of rise and fall. The seeds of this fragmentation were sown in the complex web of succession disputes and internal rivalries. The Mongols were great at conquering, but when it came to maintaining unity, they were about as successful as a cat herder in a hurricane. By the late 13th century, the once mighty empire began to splinter into 4 major khanates: the Golden Horde, the Chagatai Khanate, the Ilkhanate, and the Yuan dynasty in China. Each khanate had its own personality, like siblings with vastly different interests, and their paths diverged more dramatically than a soap opera plot twist. Take the Yuan dynasty, for instance. Established by Kublai Khan in 1271, it ruled over China with a blend of Mongol vigor and Chinese sophistication. However, by the mid-14th century, the dynasty was as shaky as a house of cards in a windstorm. Economic troubles, rampant corruption, and a string of natural disasters left the Yuan rulers scrambling to hold onto power. In 1368, the Ming dynasty rose like a phoenix from the ashes, booting the Mongols out of China and signaling the end of Mongol rule in the region. Meanwhile, the Golden Horde, nestled in the steppes of Russia, was dealing with its own set of headaches. They were a force to be reckoned with, but internal strife and external pressures from rising Russian principalities chipped away at their dominance. By the 15th century, the once mighty horde was reduced to a shadow of its former self, eventually dissolving into smaller khanates and fading into the annals of history. Now, if you're wondering about the cultural impact of the Mongols, let's just say they were the original cultural cross-pollinators. Their empire was a melting pot of diverse traditions, languages, and religions. The Mongols were remarkably tolerant for their time, allowing conquered peoples to maintain their customs and beliefs. This openness facilitated a vibrant exchange of ideas and innovations, like a medieval version of Silicon Valley, minus the tech startups and artisanal coffee shops. The Mongol influence was particularly profound in places like Persia, where the Ilkhanate cultivated a rich cultural renaissance. Under their rule, Persian art, poetry, and science flourished, weaving the Mongol legacy into the very fabric of Persian heritage. But let's not romanticize it too much. While the Mongols were patrons of culture, they were also pragmatic conquerors who knew the value of appeasing local elites to maintain control. It was less about altruism and more about practical governance. And let's debunk a popular myth while we're at it: the idea of the Mongols as uncultured barbarians. Sure, they could pillage with the best of them, but they also appreciated the finer things in life. Under Mongol rule, trade routes like the Silk Road enjoyed unprecedented security, allowing merchants to travel and trade with relative ease. This economic boom led to a cross-cultural exchange that enriched the world, from the spread of technologies like gunpowder and the compass to the introduction of new crops that would eventually shape global diets. But what about the darker side of the Mongol legacy? Well, the stories of bloodthirsty hordes laying waste to cities aren't entirely unfounded. The Mongols did employ psychological warfare to great effect, making examples of cities that resisted their rule. Yet, this brutal reputation was part of a broader strategy to maintain control over their sprawling empire. The Mongols understood that fear could be a powerful tool in managing a diverse and often unruly population. As for the legacy of their strange rituals and societal norms, it's a mixed bag of awe and bewilderment. The spiritual practices of the Mongols, such as scapulomancy and shamanic rituals, left an indelible mark on the cultures they touched. Their belief in the divine mandate of their leaders influenced the political structures of successor states, where rulers often claimed a heavenly right to rule, an echo of the Mongol worldview that reverberated through the ages. The fall of the Mongol Empire, while inevitable, was not the end of their influence. Their legacy lives on in the cultural and genetic tapestry of the regions they once dominated. From the architectural wonders of the Ilkhanate to the linguistic traces left in the wake of their conquests, the Mongols' impact is as wide-reaching as their empire once was. In the end, the story of the Mongols is a testament to the complex nature of empire building. They were a force of destruction and creation, leaving behind a world forever changed by their ambitions. Their strange rituals and societal norms, once seen as alien and exotic, became part of the rich mosaic of human history. So, the next time you hear tales of the fearsome Mongol horde, remember that behind the myths and legends lies a story of adaptability, innovation, and cultural exchange. A story that continues to shape our world in ways both seen and unseen. In the vast theater of history, where empires rise and fall like particularly dramatic soap operas, the Great Wall of China stands out as one of the most ambitious, and let's face it, audacious set designs ever conceived. Before Netflix binges or Marvel superhero sagas, the Warring States period of China was the original multiverse of madness. We're talking about a time around the 7th century BC, when China was less a unified nation and more an enthusiastic collection of squabbling kingdoms, each convinced they were the best thing since sliced mantou. During this era of political chaos, these states weren't exactly exchanging friendly neighborhood barbecues. Instead, they were busy building walls, lots of them. These early versions of the Great Wall were less great and more functional, serving as defenses against raids from neighbors who clearly didn't get the memo about borrowing sugar instead of territory. Imagine a patchwork quilt sewn by a committee, where every member has a different idea of what a quilt should look like. That's your early Chinese wall-building strategy right there. Enter Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, with ambitions as massive as his empire's newly minted name. If you thought organizing a family reunion was tough, try unifying China in 221 BC. Qin Shi Huang wasn't just about consolidating power, he was about consolidating walls. The emperor looked at the scattered defenses and thought, why not turn this hodgepodge into something that screams, don't even think about it, to potential invaders? Thus, the blueprint for what would eventually become the Great Wall was laid down. Now, imagine you're the emperor's chief project manager. Your boss has just tasked you with building a wall that stretches over 13,000 miles across deserts, mountains, and the occasional bewildered farmer's field. Logistical nightmare, absolutely. But Qin Shi Huang was nothing if not determined. He commanded that conscripts from all over the empire be put to work, creating a workforce that was less motivated team and more please don't say no. The scale of this project was off the charts, literally. There were no charts that could encompass the scope of what Qin Shi Huang envisioned. Thousands of laborers, including soldiers, peasants, and prisoners, were mobilized. It was like the world's first extreme team-building exercise, only with a lot more manual labor and a lot less trust falls. The emperor's grand vision demanded an unprecedented amount of resources and manpower, and it wasn't just about stacking bricks. The wall needed to be a formidable barrier against the nomadic tribes from the north, particularly the Xingnu, who had a penchant for making uninvited house calls. The task was Herculean, and let's be real, probably more than a bit despotic. But Qin Shi Huang wasn't winning any popularity contests. He was winning at empire building. His wall was to be a symbol of strength and power, a testament to the might of the Qin dynasty. Of course, Great Wall wasn't built in a day. It wasn't even built in a single emperor's reign. But the foundations laid by Qin Shi Huang set the stage for centuries of construction and reconstruction, a testament to the emperor's stubborn resolve. In a world where messages were delivered by horseback rather than WhatsApp, coordinating such a massive undertaking was a feat worthy of its own reality show. And yet, despite the challenges, the wall began to rise, stone by painstaking stone. It was both a marvel and a monument, a symbol of both unity and division. While Qin Shi Huang's name might not be on the tip of everyone's tongue today, his wall certainly is. The Great Wall of China remains a lasting reminder of the emperor's ambitious vision and the lengths, quite literally, he was willing to go to secure his legacy. So next time you're stuck in traffic, just remember, at least you're not trying to coordinate a 13,000-mile-long construction project across ancient China with nothing but manpower and moxie. It's enough to make even the most stubborn DIY enthusiast think twice. And yet, here we are, thousands of years later, still marveling at an idea so wild, it just had to be legendary. So, if the Great Wall's origins sound like the setup for a reality TV show with a cast of thousands, the actual construction was more like an epic, slow-motion episode of Survivor, ancient China. And let's be honest, the prize for outlasting wasn't $1 million, but rather the privilege of not keeling over from sheer exhaustion. Now, let's talk materials and techniques. Picture this. You're in northern China, where the land is as harsh as a drill sergeant with a hangover. The early builders had to work with what they had, which was mostly dirt. Not just any dirt, though we're talking about a meticulous process known as rammed earth. Sounds fancy, doesn't it? But really, it's just a method of packing earth so tightly that it turns into a formidable barrier. It's like taking mud pies to a whole new level. These rammed earth walls were the OGs of the Great Wall and were crucial in the north. Why? Because stone and brick were as rare as a unicorn siding in those parts. Instead, they used layers upon layers of earth, gravel, and clay, tamped down into submission by armies of laborers. This technique was surprisingly effective, and let's face it, dirt was the one thing they had in abundance. As the wall snaked its way southward, though, things got a bit more upscale. Enter bricks and stone, the building materials that scream, "We've got this." These materials were more common in the south, where resources were more abundant. And because nothing says, "Stay out," quite like a brick wall, these sections were not just functional, but also more durable. Imagine the construction workers of the time feeling like they've upgraded from a studio apartment to a mansion with every brick laid. Now, about that workforce. We're talking about a labor pool that could make the busiest of city rush hours look like a leisurely Sunday stroll. Hundreds of thousands of individuals, a motley crew of soldiers, peasants, and prisoners, were conscripted into service. The term voluntary wasn't exactly in their vocabulary. Think of it as a national draft, but instead of battling invaders directly, they were building the wall to keep them at bay. And the conditions, let's just say that if OSHA existed back then, they'd have had a field day. The workers toiled under the sun, the moon, and everything in between. Their employee benefits package was as bare as a winter tree. Mostly, it involved staying alive long enough to see the end of their shift. Forget dental. These guys were lucky to have all their teeth by the end of it. The work was grueling, the hours endless, and the pay, well, there wasn't much of that either. It's tempting to romanticize this labor force as a band of merry builders, whistling while they worked. But let's face it, the reality was darker. Many workers were soldiers pulled from the front lines, suggesting that building a wall was somehow less dangerous than facing the Xingnu. Others were commoners, yanked from their farms and fields, and prisoners who were given a choice between hard labor or a less metaphorical dead end. The moral of the story: it's amazing what you can accomplish with a little coercion and a lot of manpower. Despite the harsh conditions, the work continued, driven by the emperor's relentless ambition and the sheer force of imperial will. The wall rose, section by back-breaking section, a testament to human endurance and, let's be honest, a bit of human stubbornness. This was a world where individual discomfort was sacrificed on the altar of collective security and imperial glory. And while the wall served its purpose as a deterrent against northern invaders, it also became an unintended monument to the resilience and exploitation of those who built it. These laborers left behind not just a wall, but a legacy of grit that still echoes through the ages. They were the unsung heroes of a construction project that was as much about defense as it was about demonstrating the power of a unified China. In the end, the Great Wall was less of a single structure and more of a patchwork quilt of styles and techniques, each section reflecting the resources and realities of its region. Yet, it was this mosaic of human endeavor that created a symbol of strength and perseverance that endures to this day. So, next time you gaze at the Great Wall, remember the real story. It's not just an architectural wonder, but a testament to the thousands of lives poured into its creation, one grueling day at a time. And speaking of legacies, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of what it really cost to build this monumental barricade. Spoiler alert, it was more than just sweat and tears. You see, the Great Wall wasn't funded by bake sales or lemonade stands. It commanded a king's ransom in silver and more manpower than you'd find at a rock concert. Imagine a project so colossal that it made the national debt look like pocket change. We're talking about a financial sinkhole that demanded a constant influx of resources. The economics of wall building in ancient China were, in a word, staggering. The Han dynasty alone, which took over the wall-building baton from the Qin, spent what would be the equivalent of billions in today's currency. And when I say billions, I mean the kind of money that makes you wonder if the emperor had a side hustle as a dragon-slaying treasure hunter. But no, this was the result of sheer imperial determination, and dare I say, a slightly reckless disregard for the treasury's bottom line. Yet, it wasn't just silver that was spent. Human life was the real currency here, and it was spent lavishly. The Great Wall is often described as the world's longest cemetery, a grim testament to the thousands of lives lost in its construction. Estimates suggest that anywhere from hundreds of thousands to over 1 million workers perished. It's hard to pin down exact numbers. Record-keeping wasn't exactly a priority when you're racing against invading hordes, but the toll was undeniably steep. For every mile of wall, there was a story of hardship and sacrifice. The burden of the wall extended beyond those toiling directly on its construction. Local communities found themselves caught in an imperial tug-of-war. Resources meant for everyday life, grain, livestock, and labor, were diverted to feed the insatiable appetite of the wall. Imagine waking up one morning to find your village entire stockpile of millet commandeered for a project hundreds of miles away. Farmers saw their sons conscripted, their fields neglected, all in the name of national defense. It's a bit like having your house commandeered for a reality TV series. Inconvenient, disruptive, and entirely out of your control. But here's where the story takes a twist worthy of a plot from a soap opera. While the Great Wall was intended to keep invaders out, it inadvertently opened up new avenues for trade. You see, when you're building a wall long enough to be seen from space, okay, maybe not from space, but you get the idea. You're going to attract attention. Traders saw opportunity in the wall's shadow, and before long, the Silk Road emerged as a bustling artery of commerce. The irony here is thicker than a Beijing fog. A structure built to restrict movement ended up facilitating it. The Great Wall became a kind of medieval toll booth, where caravans laden with silk, spices, and other exotic goods passed through. These traders weren't just bringing goods, they were bringing ideas, cultures, and, let's be real, probably a few questionable fashion trends. The wall, in its imposing majesty, became a backdrop for the economic renaissance that was the Silk Road. Trade along the Silk Road wasn't just a trickle, it was a torrent. By the Han Dynasty, Chinese silk was as coveted in Rome as a pair of Air Jordans on release day. This wasn't just trade, this was globalization before anyone knew what globalization was. And the Great Wall, standing as both a barrier and a beacon, played an inadvertent role in this economic boom. Sure, the wall was meant to keep Mongol horsemen at bay, but who knew it would also usher in the golden age of commerce? This economic surge brought benefits and challenges. On one hand, towns along the wall flourished, transforming into vibrant trade hubs. On the other, the influx of wealth had its downsides. Corruption, anyone. Local officials found themselves with sticky fingers, taking bribes and skimming profits faster than you could say, Silk Road. The wall, in all its glory, exposed both the best and worst of human nature. In the grand tapestry of history, the Great Wall stands as a testament to ambition, endurance, and a fair amount of irony. It was a defense marvel that inadvertently opened doors rather than closing them. The wall's legacy is complex, a blend of triumph and tragedy, innovation and exploitation. It's a reminder that history, much like the wall itself, is never just one thing. It's a mosaic of stories, each brick and stone carrying its own tale. So the next time you gaze upon the Great Wall, remember this. It's more than just an ancient relic. It's a monument to human endeavor, a symbol of both our capacity for greatness and our penchant for irony. The wall was supposed to keep the world out, but in the end, brought the world together in unexpected ways. And isn't that the real magic of history? It's the stories that surprise us, challenge us, and yes, sometimes make us laugh at the absurdity of it all. Stay tuned, because the tale of the Great Wall is far from over. And speaking of surprises, let's pivot to the elephant in the room, or rather, the dragon on the wall. The Great Wall of China is often imagined as this unbreachable fortress, a medieval Berlin Wall with a better backdrop. But spoiler alert, real-life history doesn't always stick to the script. Turns out, the wall was about as impenetrable as a celebrity's Twitter account during a PR scandal. You see, the wall's mythic status as an indomitable barrier makes for great storytelling, but the reality is far more nuanced, and let's be honest, a bit more entertaining. First up, let's talk about the Mongols. Yes, those notoriously fierce horsemen who seem to treat the wall like an inconvenient speed bump rather than an insurmountable barrier. Led by Genghis Khan, and later his grandson Kublai Khan, the Mongols didn't just knock at the wall's gates. They kicked them down like a rock band, trashing a hotel suite. The 13th century invasion by Genghis Khan, in particular, is a legendary example of how walls may deter, but they don't necessarily deny. Genghis Khan's approach to the Great Wall was less, let's admire the architecture, and more, how fast can we get over this thing? His strategy was simple, outflank and overwhelm. The Mongols found gaps or weaker sections to exploit, showing that the Great Wall was more like Swiss cheese than a solid block of cheddar. And let's not forget Kublai Khan, who went a step further by not just breaching the wall, but establishing the Yuan dynasty, ruling all of China for nearly a century. Talk about a hostile takeover. The Ming dynasty, that ever-diligent structure renovator, built much of the wall that tourists walk on today. But even their upgrades couldn't keep out everyone. The Jurchens, who later became the Manchus, managed to breach the wall in the 17th century, leading to the fall of the Ming dynasty and the rise of the king. So much for the wall as an impenetrable shield, more like a very elaborate suggestion that said, please stay out. But here's the kicker. The wall was never intended to be an impenetrable fortress. It was more like a colossal psychological gambit, a medieval mind game. Imagine standing in front of this towering structure that stretches as far as the eye can see. It's imposing, sure, but the real power lies in making potential invaders think twice. It was a visual do not enter sign writ large across the landscape. In this sense, the wall was a psychological deterrent first and a physical barrier second. Now, let's address the romantic narratives that paint the wall as a heroic line of defense. These tales often skip over the tactical realities of ancient warfare. Battles weren't just about charging at walls. They were about strategy, espionage, and sometimes just plain bribery. Yes, that's right, bribery. There are accounts of guards accepting a little something extra under the table to look the other way. Turns out, the real Achilles' heel of the Great Wall wasn't its structure, but the people manning it. Human nature, am I right? And then there's the technological side. Ancient warfare was a bit like a high-stakes game of rock, paper, scissors. Siege tactics, such as ladders, siege towers, and tunnels, were the equivalent of playing scissors against the wall's rock. Sure, the wall was a formidable physical structure, but innovation and cunning often found their way around it, under it, or over it. Over time, the wall's effectiveness waned as its maintenance became a logistical nightmare. Imagine trying to keep a 13,000-mile-long fence in perfect condition when your maintenance crew is basically the ancient equivalent of one guy with a screwdriver and a prayer. The Ming dynasty's attempts to reinforce the wall were like trying to patch a sinking ship with duct tape. The sheer scale of the task, paired with the relentless pressure from northern tribes, meant that the wall was more about presence than practicality. In the grand scheme of things, the Great Wall was less of a protective fortress and more of a theatrical display, a grand gesture that said, we're here, we're organized, and we've got a really big wall. It was a symbol of strength and unity, even if reality sometimes involved a bit of smoke and mirrors. The wall's legacy is not in its invincibility, but in its audacity, its scale, and its testament to human endeavor, both brilliant and flawed. So, while the Great Wall may not have been the impenetrable fortress of legend, it remains a monumental achievement in human history. Its story is one of ambition, resilience, And yes, a fair bit of irony. It's a reminder that history is full of surprises, and that sometimes the greatest stories are the ones where the truth is even more fascinating than the myth. And trust me, we've only scratched the surface of this colossal tale. Stay tuned, because there's more to this story than meets the eye. The Great Wall may have started its life as a utilitarian behemoth, but its cultural and symbolic legacy has transformed it into something akin to the Mona Lisa of defensive architecture. Today, it's less about keeping out marauding hordes and more about drawing in hordes of tourists with selfie sticks. It's funny how the wall has become a poster child for resilience and perseverance, even though it was originally a testament to China's keep-out policies. Talk about an image makeover worthy of a reality TV show. In modern China, the Great Wall is a symbol of national pride and historical continuity. It's like the ultimate Made in China label. Only this one's been around for centuries and isn't going out of fashion anytime soon. The wall's enduring allure is as much about its cultural significance as its sheer physical presence. Spanning approximately 13,000 miles, it's a sprawling testament to human tenacity, and let's be honest, a touch of imperial vanity. The wall stands as a reminder of the country's long history of facing challenges head-on, even if that sometimes involved a few questionable construction practices along the way. But the wall's reputation isn't confined to China alone. Globally, it's become an icon of human endeavor and a testament to the lengths societies will go to protect themselves, or at least appear to be doing so. This legacy of resilience has been romanticized, turning the wall into a metaphorical monument that speaks to the universal human experience of overcoming obstacles, even if those obstacles weren't always as impenetrable as they seemed. Let's not forget the myths. Oh, the myths. The Great Wall has more tall tales attached to it than a fisherman's favorite spot. One of the most enduring is that it's the only man-made structure visible from space, a claim that's been debunked more times than a celebrity gossip headline. In reality, the wall is about as visible from the moon as your garden fence is from your neighbor's attic. But who needs truth when the myth is so much more fun at dinner parties? The wall's transformation from pragmatic defense mechanism to cultural symbol has been a journey as winding as the wall itself. During the Ming Dynasty, it was all about practicality, but fast forward to the 20th century, and it's about heritage and identity. The wall has become a symbol of China's historical narrative, one that emphasizes continuity, endurance, and a touch of the dramatic. It's no wonder that visitors flock by the millions each year, eager to walk in the footsteps of history, or at least snag a killer Instagram shot. Economically speaking, the wall has gone from being a resource-sapping monstrosity to a cash cow for tourism. Estimates suggest that the tourism industry surrounding the Great Wall rakes in billions of yuan annually. That's a far cry from the days when the wall's primary financial impact was draining the imperial treasury faster than a kid through a candy store. The wall isn't just a relic, it's a thriving business model that brings history to life while boosting the local economy. Who knew that ancient defense strategies could lead to modern economic boons? The Great Wall's global significance isn't just about tourism dollars, though. It's also a powerful diplomatic symbol, representing China's historical contributions to the world. When foreign dignitaries visit, a trip to the wall is often on the itinerary, serving as a not-so-subtle reminder of China's vast and enduring influence. It's like the ultimate diplomatic power move, less about showing off might and more about showcasing legacy. Yet, for all its grandeur, the wall is a reminder that even the most impressive structures are subject to the whims of time and nature. Over the centuries, sections of the wall have deteriorated, victims of both the elements and human neglect. Preservation efforts are ongoing but face challenges that rival the wall's original construction. Weather, erosion, and the occasional overzealous tourist with a chisel have all taken their toll. It's a bit like trying to keep a classic car in mint condition while driving it cross-country every day. In a twist of irony, the wall, which was once a symbol of isolation, is now a bridge connecting cultures. It's a place where history buffs, adventure seekers, and casual tourists come together, drawn by the stories embedded in its stones. The wall has become a venue for cultural exchange, proving that even the most imposing barriers can foster connection. And when it comes to ambitious construction projects, history has a way of repeating itself. Look around, and you'll see echoes of the Great Wall in modern endeavors, from skyscrapers reaching for the clouds to infrastructure projects spanning continents. Each of these is a testament to humanity's relentless drive to build, expand, and sometimes defy logic. The lesson here: ambition knows no bounds, and neither do the stories we construct around it. In the end, the Great Wall of China's legacy is as complex as its history. It's a tapestry woven from bricks, ambition, and a fair share of human drama. It's a testament to what we can achieve when we set our minds to something, whether that's defending a kingdom or just making a statement. The wall stands as a reminder that while history may not always repeat itself exactly, it sure does love a good sequel. So next time you ponder the Great Wall, remember, it's not just a wall. It's a story, a symbol, and a legacy that continues to captivate and inspire. A monumental testament to the audacity of the human spirit. In the 14th century, an unassuming flea embarked on a world tour that would make rock stars weep with envy. This wasn't your average flea circus act, though. This was the Black Death, taking an encore it never quite finished. Picture a deadly road trip that started somewhere in the steppes of Central Asia, caravanning its way through bustling trade routes to reach Europe, leaving devastation in its wake. It's like a medieval version of a viral TikTok challenge, except this one involved actual viruses, and it wasn't funny. So, what's our starting point? The Silk Road, the ancient superhighway of trade, commerce, and as it turns out, pandemics. The Black Death hitched a ride on this bustling network like a hitchhiker from hell, moving with the speed and enthusiasm of a teenager on their first road trip. And it wasn't just the Silk Road. The disease found its way onto ships, turning merchant vessels into floating vectors of doom. You could say it was the original going viral, but without the cute cat videos. Now, the stars of this grim show were fleas. These tiny pests were the unintentional couriers of one of history's deadliest pandemics. They hitched rides on the backs of black rats, the furry Uber drivers of their day. These rats, in turn, were ubiquitous passengers on the merchant ships crisscrossing the Mediterranean. It was a rat race in the most literal sense. And while we're at it, let's give a polite nod to medieval hygiene, or rather, the lack thereof. Hygiene standards back then were as loose as a medieval tunic. Bathing wasn't exactly top of the to-do list for most people. In fact, many believed that water was harmful, which, surprise, surprise, made them prime targets for the flea-carried Yersinia pestis bacterium. It's a bit like inviting vampires in and then complaining about your anemia. Here's a stat to sink your teeth into. In less than a decade, the Black Death wiped out anywhere from 30% to 60% of Europe's population. That's about 25 to 50 million people, give or take a few million souls. Just imagine if half your friends suddenly disappeared. Who'd be left to laugh at your jokes? The disease spread faster than gossip in a medieval tavern, moving from city to city at a breakneck pace. In Florence, for example, the plague swept through so quickly that Giovanni Boccaccio noted, all died alike, both those who fled and those who stayed behind. Talk about a travel advisory. The pandemic wasn't just a medical catastrophe, it was also a social and economic earthquake. Cities, which were medieval hubs of trade and culture, became ghost towns almost overnight. Trade came to a screeching halt as fear of contagion stopped merchants in their tracks. The fledgling economies of Europe were left staggering like a knight who'd had won too many pints of ale. Labor shortages meant that fields lay fallow and food production plummeted. When there aren't enough people to work the land, dinner plans quickly become a bit more complicated. But let's not romanticize the past too much. The idea that the Black Death was some divine punishment or cosmic rebalancing act is a narrative that sounds poetic, but doesn't quite hold up to scrutiny. Sure, it's tempting to think of it as nature's way of dealing with overpopulation, but that's just a medieval spin on the old things happen for a reason trope. In reality, the Black Death was a stark reminder of how interconnected and vulnerable humanity really is. So, as we wrap up this leg of our journey into the past, let's remember the fleas, the rats, and the humans who were all unwitting actors in this dark chapter of history. The Black Death was an equal opportunity destroyer, indifferent to wealth, status, or power. It was a grim guest that overstayed its welcome, leaving a legacy that would shape Europe for centuries to come. Stay tuned, because the story doesn't end here. So, as if the fleas and rats weren't enough of a party, the chaos didn't stop with bodies piling up faster than you can say, plague doctor. Society went into a tailspin that any modern-day disaster movie would envy. Let's dive into the immediate aftermath, where law and order were about as stable as a Jenga tower in an earthquake. First up, picture this. A bustling medieval city, abruptly reduced to a ghost town. It's like one of those post-apocalyptic scenes where everyone has vanished except here. The remnants of life were disturbingly fresh. With so many people kicking the bucket, social structures crumbled. The law, more like guidelines really. Local authorities were either too sick, too dead, or too overwhelmed to enforce anything. Crime rates through the roof. Looting became a popular pastime, and without anyone to uphold the law, it was a free-for-all, like Black Friday shopping, but with more existential dread and less consumer electronics. Now, onto the bizarre religious responses. When the going gets tough, the tough turn to creative spirituality. Enter the flagellants. In a move that screams this is a terrible idea, these folks believed that whipping themselves in public would appease an angry god and halt the plague. Spoiler alert, it didn't. They paraded through towns, chanting and lashing themselves in a display of piety that was as dramatic as it was ineffective. Imagine a traveling medieval emo band, without the eyeliner, but with a lot more blood. Their processions were macabre spectacles, drawing crowds and spreading dread faster than the plague itself. And just when you thought it couldn't get weirder, they believed that 24 hours of self-inflicted pain would bring divine mercy. Let's just say their theology was a bit like their hygiene, questionable at best. Then there was the issue of social distancing, or the lack thereof. In an era where personal space was as mythical as unicorns, the concept of staying 6 feet apart wasn't just unrealistic, it was practically impossible. Cities were tightly packed, and people lived cheek by jowl. Imagine trying to avoid germs when your entire neighborhood is essentially one giant petri dish. Good luck with that. The population density in places like Paris and London was such that a sneeze could probably cover more territory than a modern-day tweet. Folks tried to flee to the countryside, hoping fresh air would save them, but the plague had a knack for following them like a bad penny. Speaking of bad ideas, let's not forget the attempts at self-protection. People wore masks stuffed with herbs, as if a sprig of lavender could stop a bacterium. It's the medieval equivalent of thinking a little hand sanitizer will save you during a zombie apocalypse. Others resorted to more extreme measures, like carrying around sweet-smelling posies to ward off the bad air. While it might have made them smell nicer, it didn't do much for their health. Wealthier individuals locked themselves away in their homes, the original quarantine, except without Netflix to keep them entertained. Now, let's talk numbers, because what's history without a little math to spice things up? The mortality rate in cities could reach up to 60%, and in some unlucky villages, entire populations vanished. The death toll was so high that traditional burials were often abandoned. Mass graves became the norm, with bodies piled unceremoniously like logs for a winter fire. The sheer scale of death was staggering. One chronicler in Siena recorded 80,000 deaths in a city that probably didn't even have that many residents to start with. It's safe to say that keeping track of the dead became a logistical nightmare, not unlike trying to count jelly beans in a jar. If jelly beans were human lives, that is. Economically, the Black Death was a wrecking ball through the medieval economy. Labor shortages led to skyrocketing wages for the survivors, who suddenly found themselves in high demand. If you were a peasant who lived through the plague, you had the bargaining power of a modern-day tech mogul. Land, once the most valuable commodity, suddenly had more open plots than a deserted theme park. With fewer mouths to feed, the price of food plummeted. It's an economic paradox where scarcity led to abundance, just not the kind anyone wanted. But let's not romanticize the aftermath as a golden age for peasants. Sure, they had better wages, but they also had to deal with the trauma of losing friends, family, and entire communities. The social fabric was torn, and the psychological impact was profound. Life became a game of survival, and any semblance of normalcy was long gone. The idea that everyone lived happily ever after is a fairy tale as believable as a knight slaying a dragon. As we wrap up this part of our journey through the twisted aftermath of the Black Death, remember that societal chaos was just the beginning. The repercussions would continue to unfold like a multi-part drama, one where every episode brings a new twist. We've seen law and order break down, bizarre religious rituals take center stage, and a society scramble to protect itself with methods that were more about hope than effectiveness. But the story doesn't end here. There's more upheaval, transformation, and resilience to explore. So, stay tuned as we delve deeper into the legacy of one of history's darkest chapters. The ripples of the Black Death were far from a fleeting nightmare. They were more akin to a seismic shift that would reshape Europe's social and economic landscape for generations. It's like the medieval version of turning a ship around, slow, cumbersome, and with a lot of unintended passengers suddenly finding themselves in first class. The feudal system, that age-old pyramid scheme where peasants toiled away on the land for the benefit of their lords, took a nosedive that even the most optimistic of noblemen couldn't ignore. As the plague swept through, it didn't just claim lives. It claimed the very backbone of the feudal economy, the labor force. With up to 60% of the population gone, fields that once bustled with activity looked more like ghostly art installations, eerie in their stillness. The survivors, those resilient few who managed to dodge death's scythe, found themselves in a peculiar position. Suddenly, they were the medieval equivalent of Silicon Valley coders. Everyone wanted them, and they could name their price. Picture the scene. Landlords, those once untouchable figures draped in velvet and entitlement, now found themselves groveling at the feet of the very peasants they once barely acknowledged. It's as if the universe decided to have a laugh, flipping the social hierarchy on its head. The stark reality was that without workers to till the land, the lord's wealth withered faster than you can say serfdom. And so, the bargaining tables turned. Peasants could demand better wages, improved working conditions, and even the faint whiff of freedom. If you ever wondered what a peasant's revenge might look like, this was it. Less pitchforks and torches, more supply and demand. This shift was more than just economic. It was a social revolution in disguise. The traditional power dynamics crumbled like stale bread, paving the way for the rise of a working class that would eventually become the backbone of modern society. It's the kind of unexpected plot twist that makes history so darn riveting. The noble class, who once wore their superiority like a second skin, now had to contend with the uncomfortable truth that they needed the peasants more than the peasants needed them. It was a humbling experience, to say the least. But before we get too carried away with tales of peasant empowerment, let's not forget the grim realities that came with this newfound agency. The cost of dying during the plague wasn't just emotional. It hit the wallet too. Burials, which were once solemn rituals, turned into a logistical and financial nightmare. As demand for coffins and grave diggers skyrocketed, so did the prices. In places like London, the cost of a burial could range from a few pence to several shillings, depending on how much dignity you could afford in death. If you were lucky enough to have a few coins squirreled away, you might secure a coffin and a spot in a mass grave. If not, well, let's just say the options were limited and less than picturesque. And while we're talking economics, it's worth noting that the sudden labor shortages forced innovations in agriculture and manufacturing. With fewer hands to work the fields, landowners started experimenting with new farming techniques and crop rotations, inadvertently setting the stage for agricultural advances that would eventually lead to increased productivity. It's a classic case of necessity being the mother of invention. The wheels of progress, albeit slow and creaky, began to turn. Yet, as with all seismic shifts, there were winners and losers. The church, which had long been a stalwart pillar of medieval society, found its influence waning. The collective trauma of the plague led many to question their faith and the church's ability to provide answers. After all, when the clergy themselves were dropping like flies, it was hard to maintain the illusion of divine protection. This growing skepticism would eventually fuel movements like the Protestant Reformation, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. That's a story for another day. For now, let's revel in the delicious irony of landlords lamenting their losses while peasants negotiated for better lives. The societal upheaval was like a medieval soap opera, complete with dramatic reversals of fortune and unexpected alliances. And while the road to a more egalitarian society was long and fraught with challenges, the seeds of change were undeniably sown in the fertile soil of post-plague Europe. As we pause here, teetering on the edge of this transformative era, remember that the Black Death was as much a catalyst as it was a catastrophe. It forced societies to adapt, rethink, and ultimately evolve. And while it left a trail of sorrow and loss in its wake, it also paved the way for new opportunities and a reshaping of the world order. So, as we continue our journey through this fascinating chapter of history, keep an eye out for the ways in which these changes reverberated across Europe, setting the stage for the modern age. There's plenty more to uncover, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's next. And so, we find ourselves at the dawn of a new cultural epoch, set against a backdrop of skeletal motifs and philosophical musings that would make even the most morbid Goth proud. The Black Death, with all its doom and gloom, inadvertently became the muse for a cultural renaissance. Who knew a pandemic could moonlight as an art critic? Let's start with art. Picture the medieval world. Frescoes and paintings were like the Instagram of the time, except the filters were way less forgiving. As the plague swept through Europe, artists began to incorporate themes of death and decay into their work, a stark reflection of the macabre reality they lived in. The dance macabre, or dance of death, became all the rage. This was no TikTok dance challenge, though. It was a chilling reminder that death spared no one, from king to commoner. Skeletons frolicking with the living became a popular motif, a sort of medieval memento mori, a Latin phrase meaning, remember you will die, which, let's face it, wasn't exactly the motivational poster you'd want hanging in your bedroom. Artists like Bernd Nark and Hans Holbein the Younger took this theme to new heights, or perhaps depths. Nark's Dance Macabre in St. Nicholas Church in Tallinn is a haunting masterpiece, featuring a procession of the living led by death itself. Holbein's woodcuts in the Dance of Death series depicted everyday life interrupted by skeletal figures, a grim but vivid commentary on mortality. It was as if the artists were saying, hey, life's short, and death's just around the corner, so why not have a little dance? Meanwhile, literature wasn't about to miss out on this existential party. The likes of Giovanni Boccaccio and Geoffrey Chaucer channeled the chaos and upheaval into their writings. Boccaccio's The Decameron is a collection of novellas set against the backdrop of the plague. 10 young people, seeking refuge from the disease, entertain each other with stories that range from the bawdy to the tragic. Boccaccio didn't just capture the mood of the times, he immortalized it. His tales reveal a society grappling with mortality, the fragility of life, and the enduring human spirit. It's like a medieval Netflix series, with each story offering a glimpse into the human condition. Chaucer, on the other hand, brought us the Canterbury Tales, a collection of stories told by a group of pilgrims on their way to Canterbury. While not explicitly about the plague, Chaucer's work reflects the social tensions and shifting dynamics of post-plague England. Through characters like the Pardoner and the Summoner, Chaucer skewered the corruption within the church and highlighted the diverse voices emerging in the wake of societal upheaval. His tales were as much a commentary on the changing world as they were a source of entertainment. Speaking of the church, let's delve into the religious metamorphosis. The Black Death was a theological curveball that left the church scrambling for answers. With so many clergy members succumbing to the plague, the institution's credibility took a hit. People began to question the church's authority and its ability to intercede with the divine. In some places, this led to a decline in traditional religious practices and the rise of more personal, introspective forms of faith. It's like people finally started reading the terms and conditions of their spiritual contracts and realizing they weren't getting what they signed up for. This spiritual shift paved the way for movements like the Lollards in England, who advocated for a return to the scriptures and criticized the church's excesses. While they faced suppression, their ideas planted the seeds for the Protestant Reformation, which would eventually upend the religious landscape of Europe. So, in a way, the plague was like the world's worst conference call. Everyone was forced to rethink their priorities, and not everyone was happy with management. Now, let's talk about the intellectual awakening that was brewing. The Black Death set the stage for the Renaissance, a period of renewed interest in classical learning and humanism. Scholars began to turn away from purely religious studies and towards the works of ancient Greek and Roman thinkers. The focus shifted from the divine to the human experience, a shift that would transform art, science, and philosophy. Florence, the epicenter of this intellectual revival, became a melting pot of ideas. Here, the Medici family, those famed patrons of the arts, supported creatives like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. These artists explored human anatomy with a curiosity that bordered on obsession. Da Vinci's sketches of the human body are as much scientific inquiry as they are art. And let's not forget Michelangelo's David, a masterpiece that celebrates human beauty and potential. It's as if the artists were saying, forget the skeletons, let's focus on the living for a change. And then there was literature's golden child, Petrarch, often dubbed the father of humanism. He championed the study of classical texts, emphasizing the importance of individual thought and expression. His work laid the groundwork for the humanistic values that would define the Renaissance. It's like he opened a window to let in the fresh air of ancient wisdom after the plague had shut all the doors. So, while the Black Death was a devastating chapter in history, it also ushered in a period of profound transformation. Artists and writers, in their own ways, grappled with the fragility of life and the certainty of death. They used their work to explore what it meant to be human in a world where mortality was a constant companion. The religious and intellectual shifts that followed set the stage for the Renaissance, a period of rebirth that would redefine Europe's cultural and intellectual landscape. As we leave this exploration of art, literature, and religion, remember that these changes were not just reactions to the plague, but also catalysts for new ways of thinking about life and death. The Black Death, in all its horror, forced humanity to confront its own impermanence, and in doing so, inspired a cultural renaissance that continues to resonate to this day. Our journey is far from over, so stay tuned as we delve deeper into the legacy of this transformative period and uncover the enduring impact of history's darkest muse. As we saunter out of the dark corridors of Europe's plague-ridden past, let's take a moment to marvel at how the Black Death, as much a catalyst as it was a catastrophe, unleashed a series of transformations that would turn some medieval norms on their heads. It's like history decided to shake the etcher's sketch and start afresh, scribbling new lines of social, economic, and intellectual evolution. And while the Renaissance was busy being its fabulous self, the Black Death was the grim undercurrent that spurred these changes. Now, let's tackle a bit of medieval medicine, or what passed for it back then. If you think medieval doctors were just a bunch of quacks with leeches, you're not entirely wrong. But there's more to the story. Sure, some treatments were more about superstition than science. Take bloodletting, for example, a favorite go-to remedy that was supposed to balance the humors. By the way, these humors were bodily fluids, not a comedy genre. The idea was that illness came from an imbalance in these fluids, which sounds oddly like a medieval version of your chakras are misaligned. And then, there was the infamous plague doctor garb, complete with beak-like masks stuffed with aromatic herbs. While it might look like the medieval equivalent of an elaborate Halloween costume, it wasn't entirely without merit. Those herbs weren't curing anything, but they did filter out some foul smells. In a time when miasma theory, the idea that disease was spread through bad air, was all the rage, these beak masks were like primitive air fresheners. But let's not kid ourselves. These weren't miracle workers, just desperate attempts at avoiding the Reaper's scythe. Fast forward to the modern era, and some might argue we're not all that different. While we're not prescribing leeches anymore, thankfully, the Black Death taught us a thing or two about pandemics that still resonate today. Social distancing, for instance, isn't a new concept. Medieval cities tried to implement it, but with people packed tighter than sardines in a tin, it was less 6 feet apart and more cozy in a plague stew. Let's also debunk the myth that the Black Death was a one-off horror show. It actually lingered, playing out like a series of unfortunate sequels. The plague returned in waves over the centuries, sometimes with less fanfare, but always lurking like a bad penny. This persistence reshaped urban planning, sanitation, and health practices in Europe. Cities began to invest in public health measures, albeit slowly, realizing that clean water and waste management might just be a better investment than, say, another cathedral. But enough about the gloom. What about the economic shifts? The labor shortages that followed the Black Death didn't just give peasants newfound bargaining power. They also nudged Europe towards a more market-driven economy. With fewer workers, wages rose, and the rigid feudal system began to crumble like a poorly made pie crust. This shift laid the groundwork for capitalism, turning Europe into a bustling hub of trade and commerce in the centuries to come. It's as if the plague was an unintentional architect of modern economic structures, proving that even pandemics have side gigs. Politically, the Black Death shook the status quo like a snow globe in a toddler's hands. Monarchs found their power challenged as local lords and city-states gained autonomy. In England, the peasants' revolt of 1381 was a direct result of post-plague tensions. The serfs, inspired by their newfound leverage, demanded rights and reforms. Although the revolt was quashed, it sent shockwaves through the feudal system, signaling that the winds of change were blowing. It foreshadowed a gradual shift towards more centralized nation-states, with monarchs eventually reasserting control, but this time with a keener sense of the changing tides. And if you thought the Black Death was just a European affair, think again. Its tentacles reached far beyond, impacting trade networks from the Middle East to China. The disruption of trade routes and local economies had ripple effects, forcing regions to adapt in ways that would alter global commerce. It was an early lesson in globalization. When one part of the world sneezes, quite literally in this case, the rest of the world catches a cold or a plague. As we wrap up this whirlwind tour of the Black Death's aftermath, it's clear that history has a way of teaching lessons, even if we don't always ace the test. For one, pandemics reveal the fragility of human systems. They force us to innovate, to reflect on our societal structures, and to confront our mortality. They remind us that life is as unpredictable as a medieval weather forecast. So, what's the takeaway from our grim jaunt through history's darker alleys? Maybe it's that humanity, despite its many blunders, has an uncanny knack for resilience. We adapt, we evolve, and sometimes we even learn from our mistakes. And as much as we like to think we're masters of our destiny, history shows us that we're often just along for the ride. And while the Black Death's shadow loomed large, it was also a turning point, a dark prelude to a brighter chapter. It was a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable adversity, there's room for growth, change, and dare I say, a bit of humor amidst the chaos. After all, if history's taught us anything, it's that the human spirit is a hardy thing, capable of weathering storms and emerging, if not unscathed, then at least a little wiser. So next time you hear about the next big pandemic scare, maybe skip the toilet paper hoarding and remember the lessons of the past. Who knows, you might just find that history has a few tricks up its sleeve yet.